Hello there, and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. This is season 15, episode 54, and we are live with Kruw, who is the operator of the most successful Wasabi Wallet 2.0 coordinator, someone who basically picked up the torch and is doing a very good job. If you go to wasabiist.io, you're going to see more information about his coordinator. He is charging no fees right now, which seems irrational but seems to be successful. And I'm not sure if I'm doxing him, but he agreed to be here on video, so you get to see his face. If you're on Spotify, maybe you should check out his face. And this episode is sponsored by Sideshift.ai, Layer 2 Labs, Starknet, and Hodling.ch. Stay tuned for more information. Welcome, Kruw.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. And thank you to the sponsors for promoting the show.
Man, I think Wasabi Wallet is such a recurrent theme during this season because I started out the first episode of season 15 was with Max Hilbrand, and he spoke about the integration of Shop and Bit with the buy anything button. And then I had another interview to talk about shutting down Wasabi Wallet. And then I had another interview to talk about the development of Wasabi Wallet with Lucas and also Clement. And it's pretty cool that the project has its own legs, you know? It did not require a company. There are community members who are willing to pick up what's left of it and start this community-driven approach to coordinators. And if Samourai Wallet is dead, basically, for as long as the developers are not free, Wasabi seems to keep going.
Yeah. So that was something that actually led up to this whole situation was like Samurai's announcements of this decentralized whirlpool, right? That they had to play whack-a-mole with coordinators, that if you knocked one out, that it would fall back to another. But we never saw this actually come into fruition. But the community was really excited about it, right? It was like, 100,000 views and over 500 likes and stuff on Twitter when they announced this. So I'm glad you mentioned that Wasabi is a recurring theme on your show because it doesn't get nearly enough credit. Because right now we're running decentralized coordinators with Wasabi, and there was no big announcement or a pre-announcement of a pre-announcement or anything like that. It was just shipped, and this was done back in 2023, specifically by the BTC Pay developer Cooks. And he brought this forward with Nostr as the decentralization layer. Everyone loves Nostr. Everyone loves BTC Pay server. But people hated Wasabi so badly that this didn't get any traction. And no one spawned additional coordinators really up until it was necessary, I guess.
Yeah, you mentioned some names there. I also had Cooks from BTC Pay on the show a couple of times. One time it was even a drunk cast. Check that out. It's from last year. And it was a lot of fun last year, and it's no longer fun this year. I don't know exactly what happened, but it seems like there's this whole operation going on to make privacy projects shut down. And with the ETFs, it seems like a lot of the landscape has changed. I went to Nashville this year to the Bitcoin conference, and it was hard for me to recognize the community. I felt like an outsider within the Bitcoin community, which is strange.
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift in the Bitcoin culture. Like I've been around, the very first time I heard about Bitcoin was at the beginning of 2013. And that was when there was Silk Road and Mt. Gox, and it was kind of this like Wild West sort of environment. But now you have, Trump on stage speaking at a conference. You have BlackRock buying billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And the roots are still there, but you just kind of have to search for them. So, yeah, that is something, I guess, that unfortunately, I think that Bitcoin kind of revealed it was a little bit weaker than people thought it was, right? Is that when they went and arrested Samurai's developers, Sparrow immediately forked it out of the wallet, the Whirlpool CoinJoin client. And Bitcoin Keeper, their other partner, who have an iOS mobile wallet, they also removed it, and also furthermore deleted every tweet ever referencing Whirlpool. So I'm just kind of wondering if this is the very first shot that the Bitcoin is shot in the war, taking 2 casualties. They also took down Phoenix Wallet, sort of, because they abandoned the US. And I love Phoenix, and I think you do too, because I saw a post from you in their Telegram channel bragging about how you onboarded someone onto their wallet, and that's really cool. So they got Sparrow, they got Bitcoin Keeper, they got Samourai, they got ZK Snacks' coordinator for Wasabi, and Trezor, into support for their implementation. So this is kind of depressing, right? If you're a Bitcoiner, it looks like you're losing. So you had posted on Twitter not too long ago that the winner in the Samourai versus Wasabi war was the regulators.
Yeah, exactly. And it was funny during this war that both sides were accusing each other of working for some government and free litter agencies and stuff like that. And in the end, everyone went down. To some extent, I think Wasabi became much more resilient because of the community. And there's something to be said here because the Samourai people were more vocal about their advocacy and they were more ideological in saying that they would die for their privacy and they're willing to go to jail for it and blah blah blah. But the moment when someone actually went to jail, they scattered around. Most of them are in Monero these days. And Wasabi is still here trying to pick up the pieces and keep going. So I do have a lot of admiration for that. Also, I got into privacy coins because I'm trying to research ways in which Bitcoin can become more private. I'm just looking at what's out there. And you told me that Bitcoin already has pretty good privacy and fungible transactions, and you have your own setup for that. And you said that if you send me coins to an address from your special setup, I don't know exactly what that is, I can let you explain, I'm not going to be able to trace back to anything. And I sent you an address. I think the deal between us was for you to make a transaction and then we're going to try to track it. And we do this early into the episode so that by the end of this, we have the confirmations, we have everything, and we have time to confirm whatever happened. So for people listening on Spotify and audio-only platforms, I guess for this one, you should switch to video so you can actually see what's happening. But we will try to do play-by-play commentary so that you understand everything that's happening on the screen. So I sent you an address, Kruw. What's going to happen next?
Yep. So I'm going to try and send a payment directly in a CoinJoin. And this is a basically unknown feature of the Wabi-Sabi protocol is you don't have to mix your coins and then send them in 2 different steps. And in Samourai, this would be 3 different steps, right? They have a pre-mix transaction, they have the mix, and they have post-mix transactions. But in Wasabi, you can do this all in one step. You can do your pre-mixing, post-mixing, and sending, or pre-mixing, mixing, and post-mixing all in one shot. So I'm going to be sending to your address. It's BC1Q, blah, 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 blah. And it ends with XZA57. So let's see. I've got it up on my list here. I'm going to start CoinJoin. I'm going to look for an error.
Yeah, that's right. It ends with PXZA57.
Correct. Okay, so it's going to start registering for this round. And remember, let me check how much time is left in this round. Okay, 30 minutes. So it might be a while. But yeah, so remember that Monero and CoinJoins are a little bit different. It's, they both provide privacy, but a CoinJoin is interactive, right? There's going to be actual real users in this transaction, and they're all going to have their computers online signing, whereas opposed to Monero, where you have ring signatures and these like decoy inputs, and you can do this without everyone being online at the same time. So I think that at one point we're going to talk about like the difference between maybe base layer privacy and not second layer privacy, but application layer privacy, right? That we're getting base layer privacy on Bitcoin, but we're coordinating it through an application. So it's like a middle ground in between doing something like activating confidential transactions or doing something like reading signatures. We're doing things at the application level.
Well, I'm actually curious how you think this is going to work, because in Monero you also hide the amounts. It's not only about this CoinJoin and obfuscation that creates deniability and all of these decoys. It's also about not being able to see how many coins were sent in a transaction. And in the case of Bitcoin, it's an open ledger, so you can see all the amounts. So how do you think this is going to work?
Yep. So that is one strength that Monero has over Bitcoin, is that the actual amounts are hidden on chain. I think it's the same way in Liquid as well. So this makes CoinJoins considerably easier, right? Because you wouldn't have to worry about people pulling out their calculator and trying to add up which amounts would add up to a particular input or output. You would just need to stuff everyone in the same transaction, and that's good enough. So the way that we have to handle this on Bitcoin, because amounts aren't hidden, is your CoinJoins have to produce equal sized outputs. And so even though the amounts are visible, they all look the same to each other. So if you have a 100K SAT output, you can't tell it apart from someone else's 100K SAT output. They both could have come from the same places. So you don't really gain anything by knowing the amount, except for the Wasabi protocol, I would say, is weakest for the very largest whale in the transaction. So there is, a holy grail that is better than this, but I think that we're going to find that it's good enough.
Well, I understand this point, but it's unrealistic to assume that you're going to have an economy where people transact only the UTXOs that have come out of the CoinJoin, and there is no change when they make payments. And it's also hard to believe that every denomination is going to have its division to become part of a CoinJoin. And it's also hard for me to imagine how this is going to work in a high fee environment.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different questions nested there. I guess I'll start the last one and work my way backwards. As I responded to someone on Twitter recently, they said they were actually promoting RGB, right? It's nothing, no shitcoin, no whatever. Anyways, and they were saying that blockchains suck for privacy. And they're right. They do. And they were saying that a CoinJoin doesn't solve this. But I would say that a CoinJoin is just like the worst version of transacting on a blockchain, right? So normally you have this 10-minute block time, and it's not really practical for buying groceries or something like that. No one would wait that amount of time in line. So then you add a CoinJoin on top of this, that's going to be like another 30 minutes. So now you have 40 minutes to make your transaction. Well, that sucks, but it's not actually going to break anyone's use case. There was no one in between 10 minutes and 40 minutes who is now no longer going to use Bitcoin or is going to say, I don't want privacy because I need it in that specific time window. Fees, maybe people are more sensitive there compared to time. So with the Wasabi CoinJoin transaction, if you wanted to, you could actually save fees compared to a regular base layer transaction. A normal base layer transaction has about 10 V-bytes for the overhead, and then 100 V-bytes per input and output pair, and then about another 40 V-bytes for the change. So you're looking at like 140 to 150 V-bytes total. And when you send within a Wasabi CoinJoin transaction, that 10 V-byte overhead is paid by the coordinator, or everyone shares it, So you get slightly cheaper transactions, but this is not really practical, and it doesn't add realistic privacy. It adds some deniability, but it's a pretty easy guess. Then finally, on the cost point, there's cross input signature aggregation, which is nowhere close. There's no proposal I don't think there's any code you can run or test or anything. But this is a taproot schnorr sort of magical trick to where you get actual real savings, less bytes to create a transaction that's a coin join than a non-coin join. Yeah, if we go back to the other two questions, what were they again?
Well, I think you addressed most of it. And I was also thinking that Bitcoin is gonna have a huge dust problem at some point as the fees go up, as it's not practical, it's not private for users to consolidate everything. It's actually so when people were saying, "Oh, the fees are low again, you should start consolidating your UTXOs," I was thinking this is the worst privacy advice ever. Every effort that you've ever made for making your coins private is gonna be obliterated by this mistake of yours. And this is possibly another criticism that I have for Bitcoin privacy, because you can maintain impeccable privacy practices today, but if you leak your XPub in the future, or you make one tiny mistake, people are gonna be able to backtrack on your transactions and figure out that you're behind some of them, and it's all a permanent public ledger. So it's not like if it doesn't impact you today, it will not impact you in the future. So you have to permanently be cautious if you're using privacy and remember what you did in the past so that you don't make a bad consolidation, so that you basically combine funds from an exchange withdrawal with funds that came from a CoinJoin, and then basically you're gonna reveal a lot of what you've been doing.
Yep. So that was something that you often heard from the Samourai guys, was that Wasabi has no post-mix tools.
The banana peel,
And
right?
yeah, so this isn't the case. Wasabi has had PayJoin for like a really long time, right? Even in Wasabi 1.0. And in Wasabi 2.0, there's an additional feature that helps you with this dust, right? That when you're building a transaction, you already have some different size standard denominations in your wallet, right? You have one for 100K sats, another one for 50K, another one for 1 million. And you can piece these together into not exactly, but within a couple of percentage points of what you want to send to the merchant or whoever it is you're buying things for. So this is a really underrated feature. I think it's only also available in Bitcoin Core. It's called branch and bound. So this is A, it's a privacy tool, and B, it's a blockchain efficiency tool, right? You get to sweep all your dust and leave nothing behind, no change. But yeah, so that was a key criticism of Samourai's, I guess, followers and stuff. They have this OXT research folks who would look at Join Market or Wasabi coin joins and say, oh, look at this change. They're going and spending it at some point later. And, oh, they also reused an address when they did that. And then I saw they spent their mixed output to that reused address. Therefore, I've demixed the protocol. It's broken. So the warnings are not wrong. There are wrong ways to ruse privacy tools and ruin what you paid for or waited for, and just expose everything to blockchain analysis anyway. And that's, I think, the big advancement with Wasabi 2.0 is that you no longer have this problem with change that just accumulates in your wallet, and you can't mix it without forfeiting just privacy from the past or privacy in the future. So it takes that trade-off away, so that you really do just get privacy by default.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Granted that you can afford it and you know exactly what you're doing. I think Wasabi 2.0 makes it very easy in the sense that it's automatic. It also picks your UTXOs for payments so that you don't pay with your largest one for a tiny one. And also it gives you a warning when you're about to generate change. and tells you if you send maybe $1 or $2 more or less, then this UTXO is gonna get spent completely, and you're not gonna have to deal with the the fungibility nightmare that you're going to have with that dust. So in some cases, it's better to pay attention to that. And I really like what the developers have built. I also think that Wasabi 2.0 right now, I think the latest version is 2.0.7, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
We're on 2.1.0 now.
oh, I'm late. I mean, I need to update. Basically, something very cool that happened with that version is that you have the best in class way to boost your transaction. If it's stuck in the mempool, you have the easiest way to boost your transaction. You don't have to think if it's a CPFP, which is a child pays for parent, or an RBF, which is replaced by fee. You just hit that rocket button next to your transaction ID, and you're gonna have the option to boost it. It it works so nicely. I'm not aware of any wallet that integrated this feature so well, and I feel sorry that there's not enough funding that's happening right now for the Wasabi project.
Yeah, so in regards to Wasabi's UX, I think the RBF or transaction speedup is a good example of that, right? To where it abstracts everything away from the user. It just shows you the cost, and then you hit accept or deny. And this is really simple. And a ton of effort went in to the design of Wasabi 2.0, not just to eliminate these problems of people accidentally making privacy mistakes, but also it was an even more ambitious goal than that. The design wanted to abstract away the concept of UTXOs entirely. And I think this was a mistake. Nopara will still defend it to this day. But there was no coin control in the original wallet, right? You couldn't see your UTXOs or spend them in a custom way.
By original, you mean 2.0 when it first came out, because the 1.0
Correct.
actually had very good coin control.
Yes, 1.0 was beloved for its coin control, especially great for its privacy features and stuff. But in 2.0, all that kind of went away, and it was just this black box that would grab your UTXOs and consolidate them for you. And it's really good for brand new beginners, right? It's so hard to make mistakes. But it didn't satisfy the power users, right? They really want to be in full control of what their wallet is doing because they think they know what they're doing. So yeah, in terms of what's going on with the team now, they're still working on it, and I think it's an excellent wallet.
I do like it. I do open it from time to time to see what's happening. And I am aware that now you have the option to switch coordinators, and that's a big deal. It's a very simple user experience. You just open this section of the wallet, you paste two parameters. One is the address of the coordinator, and the other one is the fee threshold. And once you confirm that, you're connected and you can continue to CoinJoin. And I gotta give you credit for being able to pick up the pieces and continue with this project and actually have the most successful coordinator. The last time I checked, and I gotta check again, you had like 18,000 BTC that went through your coordinator. That's huge. That's a big deal.
28,000. Yep.
Even
so
better.
it's currently doing roughly like 500 Bitcoins per day on average in total volume, including remixes. And so it's really cool to have this decentralized community of their coordinators, right? Because there's no one size fits all customer. For example, my CoinJoin rounds are generally set to 1 hour long. And because of this, they get really big and provide really good privacy. But ZK Snacks, for example, their CoinJoin rounds were 10 minutes. So 2 out of 3 of them would fail to get enough participants. And as soon as there are enough people, you're ready in 10 minutes, right? So this is a different user that is being catered to, right? One, it has to be more patient, and then one kind of gets things done right away. And so there's like another coordinator out there, the second biggest one, runs their CoinJoin rounds with 30 minutes instead of 1 hour. I think it's really cool to have a market, kind of like Join Market, where all these different makers in Join Market get to set their own fees, set their own minimum amounts, and all these different things. And it'd be really cool if we could get Wasabi to the stage where the user could specify a preference and it would choose a coordinator for them based on how much fees they want to spend or how long they want to wait or anywhere in the spectrum in between.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. And I want to ask you why and how you decided to not have any fees. But before that, I got to present the ad for sideshift.ai, which is this platform where, let's say, Kruw, that someone offered to pay you, and you said, yeah, send me BTC from Wasabi, and they said, all I have is USDT or whatever. And you can't really help them, but you can say, okay, go to sideshift.ai, you're gonna send your USDT, and you can paste my BTC address, and he sends whatever it is that he has, which is that CBDC wannabe, and it's gonna get swapped for a small fee for the BTC that you want. And the fees are pretty small, the liquidity is great, and you gotta check that out. I'm not sure if it works in the US for the same reasons why Phoenix Wallet doesn't work in the US, but it's not like the VPN industry does not exist. I'm not telling you should use that, I'm just saying it exists. So sideshift.ai, check them out. They have a very cool swapping service for all of your possible use cases. I don't care if you're shitcoining or you just want to swap something that you don't want for something that you want. It's there for your use. And they're cool, and they're sponsoring this show. So thank you guys. And also, I have these two sponsors which present two different futures of Bitcoin. There's Layer 2 Labs, which is all about side chains that are two-way pegged. And it goes back to the 2014 Blockstream paper about side chains, or was it 2015? I think it was 2015. And it's a bit controversial because of the way that it handles the relationship with miners and the fact that these are miner-controlled sidechains. But at the same time, I think it's the coolest way to absorb all of the other use cases and make them denominate everything into Bitcoin and make them pay fees to the miners. So I do see this as being a potential future of Bitcoin with sidechains for everything, for all the developers to build and play and attract users, and their base currency is going to be BTC. I do like that. And I don't like when it's being presented as a block size increase, but I digress. And the other one that is sponsoring the show and is also proposing something different is called Starkware. And they're building these ZK Starks, which are basically ZK Snarks without the trusted setup. I do have an entire podcast episode about that one with the creator Eli Ben Sasson. He also participated in the creation of Zcash, and he kept searching for ways to create these ZK rollups without the trusted setup, and Starks are the way that he figured out. It's very interesting. It's avant-garde in terms of cryptography. It's less conservative than the sidechains, but all that it takes for that to come to Bitcoin is to activate Opcat, and I think they're also researching ways to not require Opcat and try to emulate the functionality of that one with the tab script. So it's pretty cool. It grants you some privacy, it grants you some scalability, and it's cool. The main advantage for basic users is that you're going to be able to sync full nodes within seconds by verifying a zero-knowledge proof, which previously was just a wild idea that's been proposed back in 2013 or something. I think Greg Maxwell was talking about zero-knowledge proofs doing this a long time ago. But that can also happen. So do your research. Look at Starkware. They have a website. And they also want to build on Bitcoin. And I do support everyone who wants to build on Bitcoin. I'm not discriminating here. I want this to be the money of the future. I want it to scale. I want it to be private. It's just that I have all the reasons in the world lately to feel pessimistic. Anyway, let's talk about your coordinator, which is Kruw.io, Kruw.io. You're not charging any fees for it, which is very strange. Why do you proceed like this? And is this even a business or is it a hobby?
Sure. I was hoping I'd get the chance to talk about drive chains, but we'll talk about the coordinator.
You can talk about drive chains too.
Okay, yeah. Because, like I said, I haven't heard everything Paul Stork has to say. I admire his fire and his passion for pushing his proposal, right? It reminds me of me shilling Wasabi, right? Like, if only people knew how good this was, then they love it, right? And I'm willing to go and debate people face to face, internet to internet, whatever, and
Tiger
convince them
to
of that,
tiger.
take their arguments. Yeah. So with drive chains, I'm not entirely on board. I don't hate the idea of a two-way peg in general. I'm not trying to scare anyone with like MEV or anything like that. But, and this is actually going to loop into the coordinator as well, which is be funny. So if you ask me why I don't like drive chains so much, imagine you're explaining Bitcoin to someone for the first time. And they say, I don't think this Bitcoin thing is going to work because the miners are just going to steal all the money out of my wallet, right? Well, you correct them and say, no, they can't do that. That's not how mining works. You can't steal the coins just because you're a miner. Like, there's reorgs, but that's not something they have the power to do. So drive chains introduces that power. And I'm not so comfortable with that.
Well, that's only on the side chains. It's not on the base layer.
Correct. But, and I get the argument that if I'm just using the base layer, I shouldn't care what people do on their side chains and stuff. But this does give miners a new way to monetize other than just mining, which is stealing. So now in the drive chains proposal, you count to some number. I think it's like 13,000 or something. And during this time period, the implicit idea here is that someone interferes during the 6 months. And I don't want people spamming me, help, please, I'm going to get stolen from in 3 months. Do something about it. Please download this blockchain, verify the rules, then come out on my side. So that's why I'm hesitant about it. I like the idea of blind merge mining. Very cool. I think you can do that already with space chains. I think Super Testnet has like a space chain launcher or something. All right. Anything before I move on to coordinators?
No, not really. I was just thinking that I think it's useful to try stuff. That's why I'm a fan of activating drive chains on Litecoin, for example. But we can also have drive chains with covenants. But that's even more dangerous because there are some protections which are provided by the BIP 300 implementation. And you can have something similar with covenants, but the miners are even more in control of it. So the user protection that takes place with counting to 13,000, that one goes away.
Okay. Yeah, but let's go back to the coordinator. So about the no fees, right when ZK Snack shut down, there were a handful of coordinators. Most of them are still running, but there's Ginger, Open Coordinator, BTIP still on the list. And each of these launched with matching fees to ZK Snacks. But this is a free market, right? So eventually, all the liquidity is going to settle at whatever is the most economic, whatever provides the best service. And it's a rush to the bottom to provide this zero fee because it's not expensive to run a coordinator, right? You just do it on your node. If you want to be up all the time and help defend against DDoS attacks, and you need a server, but I mean, it's $150 a month at the max. So my coordinator quickly became the biggest, and there's not really any reason to switch, right? And pay more. So basically, like, the first mover advantage really mattered, and being the cheapest right away mattered. That I wasn't trying to reach for monetization first. I was reaching for liquidity first.
Is that the end of the answer? Because you ended pretty abruptly.
Uh, well, I guess there's the second part of your question, which is why would you do this? Or like, is there any advantage to doing this? And so a little secret that most people aren't aware of, I mean, it's not a secret, it was in the mailing list post that announced it. But the Wabi Sabi protocol is a bit optimistic in the way that CoinJoins are designed. You don't know the output amounts until after you've already registered your inputs. So what this means is when you're breaking down into these equal sized outputs, you're going to have some change left over. Not enough normally to make a UTXO, but it'll just be like 100 Satoshis, 200, 300. And if you have enough participants in the CoinJoin, all of their little change that they leave behind, if it's big enough to create a UTXO, you can create that UTXO and claim those Satoshis for yourself. Now, generally, ZK Snacks would just add this to the mining fee, right? They had their own coordinator fee that would fund the operations. But if you're just a guy running a coordinator on your own node, these little sats add up a lot. So it's not, tons and tons of Bitcoins, but it'll pay for your server. And I think that little incentive will help drive decentralization if more people are aware of it.
Wait, so you're saying that you're not charging a coordination fee, but you're collecting the dust?
Correct. And then I think BTC Pay server implementation will never leave behind dust. It will always create some sort of change.
What about Trezor? Are they still running anything, or do you think that you could be able to collaborate with them?
Oh man, you're really digging up all the secrets here. So, in fact, the CoinJoin code still exists in Trezor. It's all open source. And you can modify this yourself to get around the ZK Snacks like hard coding and connect to any other coordinator you want. So I still need to do some testing on this. And then anyone who's planning on doing this should be cautious because it's no longer supported by Trezor, right? So you're using the code that was in existence months ago, and it's going to stay that way. But I'm planning on trying to test with my little Trezor. Let's see, I have so many of them. And try and upload a guide to that and see if we can bring back the innovation of hardware wallet CoinJoins.
Well, you don't bring it back because it's already there. It's just, I guess maybe you should make a video tutorial to show people how they can make this change.
Yep. But it was always a big, or not a big concern, but a common concern that people didn't want to have their funds on a hot wallet for CoinJoining. And so, or in Wasabi, there was a compromise there to where you could put your funds in your hot wallet, and then send them directly into CoinJoin to your cold wallet. But with Trezor, your keys are never hot. You stay on the device, you CoinJoin, you're still on the device. No problems.
Yeah, I always thought that Trezor built the best version of Wasabi. No offense to the Wasabi developers, it's just that it was so cool. They figured everything out. They worked closely with the devs, and it was such a nice UX. Just within that Trezor Suite interface.
Yep, and this is like another case of Wasabi's bad reputation, unearned bad reputation. I'm mad. Kind of sinking Trezor is that it never really caught on that people were saying, "Wow, this is a huge breakthrough that now we can CoinJoin on our hardware wallet."
It is a pretty big deal. And I don't want to speculate, but I'm pretty sure that this was the first instance when this became possible. I do remember interviewing Lawrence Nahum from Blockstream, and he was speaking about the Jade, and he had a similar idea for Join Market. I'm not sure if that ever came to fruition, but yeah, Wasabi was very much ahead of its time. And I'm actually wondering, is there any funding for the development of Wasabi going forward?
Um, Hopefully, there's some applicants to HRF and OpenSats. Um, but potentially, there's a way you can do a private donation option. One of the developers is working on the payments in CoinJoin feature for Wasabi, and it'd be convenient when you're already sending a transaction to just add a little bit of money for the developers to help support the project. And this would take place all in the same CoinJoin, and the developers don't know who paid them. So this would be a great way for the community to contribute. And this would come about as the result of a new feature, right? It's not just begging. It's sustaining the project.
I'm gonna make this a bit spicy right now, and I'm also gonna advertise it on my Twitter. I know that you are one of the best people to trace and figure out what's happening with Samourai Wallet CoinJoins. And in a few instances, you actually de-anonymized entire transactions just by using a basic tool like mempool.space. And I was wondering if you can share your screen and show how that happens and explain every step.
Yes. Let me see if I can do that really quickly.
In the meantime, I will present the ad for hodling.ch, which is a company that's based in Switzerland, and they specialize in providing all the services and tools for you to manage your own self-custody setup. So if you own a lot of Bitcoin or you're part of a company that wants to buy Bitcoin, it's a good idea to speak with them, and they will tell you whether or not you need a multi-sig, what sort of hardware wallet you should be using, how to create your setup in a way that is appropriate for your type of holding. So check out hodling.ch, and recently they also added this service that allows them, if you have enough information, they can try to recover your lost funds. So if you only have 10 out of 12 words or 9 out of 12 or something like that, or you're not sure about the order of the words because you wrote them down but you're not sure which one was the first and which one was the last, or which one is the passphrase from them, they have a service that helps you recover. And they charge a fee for that, of course, but I guess it's better than having them lost forever and not knowing what to do. So check out hodling.ch. They have this entire suite of products. And also my girlfriend said that she's sponsoring the show because she made a Pepe for you, Kruw. And if you check out Krew's profile on Twitter, which is at KRUWED, you're gonna see his new avatar, which is a frog with tiger fur. You can't beat that. A frog tiger or tiger frog, I'm not sure. A trog.
Let's see. So I can share my screen here. Okay. So Samourai had I don't know if you want to call it a partner or something, called OXT Research. And they had this blockchain analysis tool where you could enter in a transaction ID or an address, and you could expand all the different paths of what coins paid it and which coins it paid. And in this particular example, I'm showing a Whirlpool CoinJoin, and it's attached TX0. TX0 is transaction 0. It is the premix for every Whirlpool CoinJoin. So in this CoinJoin, you have the premixer split up into 5 equal-sized outputs. Each of them are a little bit over 100K sats. Each of those ones are a CoinJoin round. And then there's a uneven size change output, and then there's a fee output for Samourai. So in this particular case, the change output was sent and consolidated with every single one of these 5 mixed outputs, which you can see it creates this little kind of circle on the graph where they all meet back together. And you can be extra sure of it in this case, because out of those addresses, like 3 or 4 of them are reused. So the guy was just being lazy. He wanted to get his money out of his post-mix wallet back into his pre-mix wallet so he could spend it all. Now, this completely undoes the privacy of the CoinJoin. And anyone from OXT Research, Laurent or Ergo would agree with you on this, right? However, this is just user error. The user purposely took his post-mix funds, put them back in his pre-mix wallet, and combined them all back together. And he did this when reusing addresses. And we see this over and over and over, not just with Samourai or Join Market or Wasabi, it's all of them. But Samourai, for some vicious reason, every time this would happen, they would go out on Twitter and claim this means the implementation of their competitor was broken. And they know better, right? They know that the reason that this tracing occurred was because some address was reused. No privacy tool, no Monero swapping, Lightning swapping, Whirlpool, nothing will protect you from that. It is 100% guaranteed an address reused belongs to the same transactor. So this is like easy mode, right? This is someone reusing their addresses. Then it's also medium mode, which is someone combining the change, right? Then there's hard mode for changing or for tracing these CoinJoins, which is seeing when someone recombines all the non-change amounts together. So let's say you have some arbitrary amount of Bitcoin, 0.1234567. When you split this into the pool, you'll get 2.05s, and then you'll get a 0.01 and then some change left over.
Is there any way you can illustrate this on the screen? Since you're sharing the screen, you can just open up a tab and show something.
I would, but unfortunately, OXT is no longer a working resource. That went down with Samourai.
What about KYCP? Is that still around?
I believe the domain is up, but the resource is down. I don't want to visit on a ClearNet browser. But yes, this is the gist of all the tracking methods. Is either relies on following unmixed change or noticing when someone has reused an address. And
I can see your Twitter DMs, by the way. You're talking with these nuts.
Oh, man. Leaked everything. Okay. So, and this is the address we're waiting on you to receive your CoinJoin funds from. So let me turn off this screen share.
Okay, so basically you're saying that it was easy for Samourai Wallet users to make stupid mistakes?
I wouldn't say it was easy, but it's possible, right? And this single example, right, should hopefully debunk any example of Join Market or Wasabi that these other guys are scrutinizing and blaming and saying that they demix the tool, right? Whenever someone makes mistakes, it doesn't matter what tool you use. So I think there's just a lot of effort to discredit Wasabi as like a meme, right? There's sort of punching bags in the Bitcoin industry, like Ledger or Coinbase. to where people don't really care about offending them or being really truthful about them, because if you assume the worst, it's probably right. And Wasabi somehow gained this reputation on the back of a few myths. Um, so one of your previous guests, floppy disk, 1.4 million bytes. When Barack developed Arc, he said, "Oh, I'm looking for developers," and floppy disk responded. He says, "Yes, if you can stop using Wabi Sabi and just mention CoinJoin or ZeroLink." So when Barack had come up with Arc, he's saying, "Yeah, like as a part of my research, like Wabi Sabi is like kind of one of the building blocks that makes this possible." And people were wanting to strip the credit from Wabi Sabi for laying the groundwork in this particular case.
It's also
What
funny,
else?
so
Oh my
sorry
gosh.
for the side note, but it's also funny that Wabi Sabi was largely inspired by Cash Fusion on Bitcoin Cash. And that's actually in the
Interesting.
credits of the paper. If you read the Wabi Sabi paper, you're going to see that they mentioned Cash Fusion on Bitcoin Cash.
That's very cool. And it'd be interesting to see kind of like what you can do with unlimited block space, right? Like if I can break down to the smallest UTXOs possible, what can I do with privacy there? I think there's a drive chains proposal that's something like that, basically saying, since I have unlimited block space on this drive chain, I'm going to keep on breaking my UTXOs down forever and then never merge some significant amount of them. Because there's just so much distance between my real transactions with all these fake transactions in between, you're just guessing. Okay, so another piece of reputation that Wasabi earned was this 132 arrests. This was repeated constantly by Samourai Wallet and Samourai Dev, that plus token or whatever shitcoin scam thing that these people may have used Wasabi, that these people were all arrested because they used Wasabi. Now, there's two different things here, right? These people are using Wasabi. This statement could be true. And these people were arrested. This statement can also be true. But saying that they were arrested because they used Wasabi is a leap of logic. So you hear Wasabi Wallet, 132 arrests. How come we don't hear Samourai Wallet, 2 arrests, 2 arrests? It doesn't make sense to blame their tool for things that they were arrested for that are not related to the usage of the tool. Let's see.
Yeah, I get that. It's been a talking point for a long time. I think in privacy, you always have, for some reason, you always have these two camps. If you go to operating systems that are private for your mobile phone, you're going to run into Calyx fighting with Graphene OS, both of them claiming that the other one is evil and working for free letter agencies. If you go into privacy coins, you're going to see that Zcash and Monero have the same fight. In Bitcoin privacy, you have sort of the same situation with Wasabi and Samourai, with the mention that Join Market has been pretty peaceful. And I think only the Wasabi side was friendly with Join Market and acknowledged its merits. Whereas Samourai were saying, this is rubbish, you should not touch it. Stay away. It's terrible, these guys are scamming you. Never even attempt to use it.
Right. And like Join Market is OG, right? They did the very first coin joins that work, right? So Join Market is unique too, in the sense that you can earn from coin joining, right? This is something that actually doesn't exist in many places at all on Bitcoin, is the idea of earning yield, right? Which a lot of altcoiners love. Earning yield plus earning privacy, count me in. That's awesome. So I'm very happy that Join Market exists. So why do I work on Wasabi? Because Wasabi ultimately has better privacy and block space efficiency. So if you want to earn money when coin joining, go for it. Join market is awesome.
But you can also make money
But
by
yeah,
running a Wasabi coordinator. But my next question for you, and I think this is the most obvious one. I'm not making any assumptions about your citizenship, but you sound pretty American to me, according to the way that you speak. And how can you operate this without getting into trouble?
I'm glad you asked that question. So this kind of goes back maybe to 2020. I was a Bitcoiner before 2020, right? And kind of more of like a number go up kind of guy, right? I wasn't really involved in contributing to projects with testing or documentation or guides or anything. But I love Bitcoin Twitter and, you know, recognize the dangers of bad money and inflation. But then with 2020, we had the COVID lockdowns and we lost everything in regards to freedoms, right? I lost not just one job, but two jobs. First time because of the lockdown, second time because of the vaccine. So you start to realize that if you don't fight now, there's nothing left to fight for. The COVID era, they managed these lockdowns without any actual resistance mustering, right? There was no rebellion or blood spilled in the streets or any politicians actually paying for their actions or fearing for their safety or anything like that. They just completely got away with it. And so it was a eye-opening moment for my entire life that you can't play it safe. They are already too far ahead. You have to gamble and go all the way. So yes, I'm American. I'm currently residing in the territory of the empire. And CoinJoin coordination is probably not something that the regulators are too keen about. So the Samourai Wallet case was interesting. There were two charges that they were given, which was conspiracy to commit money laundering and running an unlicensed money transmitting business. And some Bitcoin reply people, journalists and whatnot, flocked to Twitter to say, how dare they accuse them of being money transmitters? And then they go and pull up the legal definition and the FinCEN guidance and all this fine print. But why does that matter? You and me, we're Bitcoiners, we're looking at each other. Guess what we're trying to do here? Transmit money. I'm a money transmitter. You're a money transmitter. We're all money transmitters. It's great. That's the whole purpose. So people who are trying to fit Bitcoin into the government's little box and say, no, we're not money transmitters. You are forfeiting on behalf of the Bitcoin community who is willing to stand here and fight and say, yes, we're transmitting money and we're going to change the world with it.
Okay, that's an interesting way to explain it, but you still haven't addressed the point of how this is safe from your point of view.
It's not.
So you're doubling down on something and you're acting based on your beliefs as opposed to your legal advice or whatever.
Right. So, I mean, this might seem reckless in a vacuum, right? It's like, oh my God, you coordinated over $1 billion worth of CoinJoin transactions. The Samurais made it to 2 billion, right? So you're not that far away before, they're going to breathe down your neck. And the question is, where do you stop? If I say, okay, fine, I'll shut down the coordinator node. Do I need to shut down my Lightning node? Do I need to shut down my whole Bitcoin node? Where does this end? And if the government's crime is transmitting money, there is no end. They're going to continue until Bitcoin is gone, because the purpose of Bitcoin is to transmit money. So someone has to stand up somewhere. This is the lowest hanging fruit, right? And at the very end of the trail is the miners, right? When the government says, hey, they point a gun and they say, give me your mining machine. And the Bitcoin community has to find some place to rally around and battle and actually fight and win. If you forfeit every piece of ground from here until self-custody, then you're guaranteed to lose the battle before it starts.
I agree with you, but why do you think you're safer than the Samourai Wallet developers? And why do you think that you can do this while the ZK Snacks company could not keep going? Do you think that as an American you have better legal protections? Are you protected by the First Amendment or something?
So I'm an anarcho-capitalist libertarian, right? I just have no interest in what politicians have to say or regulators have to say. I have my own personal code of ethics, which is don't cheat, steal, lie. And if people are trying to tell you what to do instead of what it's not going to work. So you're asking, is it safe? Am I protected by the Constitution? No. I mean, we haven't seen that work all the time. You know, there's some examples you can cherry pick, right? But for example, what I'm doing might be First Amendment guaranteed constitutionally. But let's look at Second Amendment, right? There's multiple legislative acts over the years that have restricted people's ability to buy and use firearms in the US, which is a guaranteed right under the Constitution, but the Constitution didn't stop these politicians. It didn't stop the cops from taking the guns or putting these people in prison. So this is not what Bitcoin relies on. We're not relying on the Constitution because cypherpunks write code. And we build Bitcoin to be strong, we don't build it to be regulated.
Yeah, I get this. It's just that I'm a bit worried. I've known you in person for a couple of years, and I'm just worried that this pursuit of yours can only turn you into martyr. And maybe that this is beautiful and people will remember what Bitcoin used to be about. But then again, look at the landscape, look at the climate. It seems like we have too many Michael Saylor followers and not too many people who remember. I mean, the previous guest that I had on the show was Charlie Shrem, right? And Charlie Shrem also went to jail because he defended the fungibility of the currency. He basically said, it doesn't matter if I sold this amount of Bitcoin to someone who used it on the Silk Road. It's just money. It's none of my business how he uses it, but he still went to jail. And I think he was the first Bitcoin martyr. He went to jail before Ross Ulbricht.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So currently in the United States, there are 7 million people in either jail, prison, probation, bond, or some sort of correctional path, right? And yeah, you're talking about knowing me in real life. I actually have my legitimate physical Vlad coin. So I will challenge the buyers of your tokens to challenge my authenticity here. So here's another thing, right? I've got a couple of souvenirs next to me. I might talk a lot of shit about the Samourai, right? But I put my money in my mouth as this right here cost me 0.1 Bitcoin.
So for the people listening on Spotify, that's the Nodl full node with the red case that runs the Samourai, Dojo, and Whirlpool and whatever.
Yep. So I'm not just a critic. I consider myself a privacy researcher, right? And if you put in the title, right, today we're talking with Kruw. He runs a CoinJoin coordinator and he's a contributor to Samourai Wallet. And be like, oh, wow, so cool. But if you put Wasabi, they're like, who cares, right? So the truth is, I actually did contribute to Samourai Wallet. I opened 3 different bug reports. The first one was not really a bug report. It was a UI change, right? Because when you open Samourai Wallet for the first time, Tor is disabled, and Dojo, which is the node application that runs on this thing at your house, is disabled. So what this means is that Samourai gets your IP address, indicating your physical location, and then your XPub address, which is your complete history of transactions and complete future of transactions you haven't sent yet. Even if you've done really good coin control and labeling and coin joining, nothing will matter if you hand them your XPub. So this is a real concern, right? But there are mitigations, right? And it's okay if you're honest with the idea that you need these 2 things active in order to gain privacy when coin joining. If either of them are off, you don't. The trusted third party, being the coordinator, can see your entire on-chain history, defeating the purpose of your privacy tool. So in May 2019, Samourai Wallet was responding to someone on Twitter that said, for the sake of transparency, both Samourai and Green also know about your balance and transactions. Okay, this is like a month before they released Dojo. Honest, right? There's nothing really complained about there. And it's a fair warning. It's glad for them to be transparent. So let's fast forward to October 2022. I'm talking with Samourai
Is there
Wallet
any
on
way
Twitter.
you can share the screen? Because you're checking out stuff right now, and it would be useful if people could see what's happening.
Let's see. Yes, I have a list here.
It's very cool that you're not just a researcher and a coordinator, but also a historian.
Right. Okay, so I have my notes here on the side that have some quotes from them. Let's see if they actually pull up. So here's a discussion where someone asked if they would implement block filters in their wallet, which is BIP 157. And block filters protect your addresses from being leaked when synchronizing a light wallet. And Samourai Wallet responds and says, no, we are a full node wallet and always have been. No one runs a full node wallet on their phone. This is just blatantly untrue. And it's untrue according to their own quote transparency in this previous tweet, where they say, yeah, like we can track your addresses, we can track your transactions. And this wasn't controversial, right? But if you bring this up later, somehow you're the devil, according to Samourai, for repeating their own cautionary instructions that they gave their users back in 2019.
Well,
So there's
I
some
guess you're
couple
also
of things
assuming some consistency there. Maybe it was a different guy who was running the account.
I suppose so. But we have some more examples that might not lead you to think they're as honest as you might think, or that they might not get the benefit of the doubt in that case. So in December 2017, Kian Rodriguez, who is arrested, unfortunately, for operating the Samourai coordinator, he's posting about how you shouldn't use a closed source wallet. Everyone agrees with this, right? That's basic, kind of cypherpunk standard, right? Open source code, good. And I can go through these one by one, but in 2018, he repeats again. I would rather recommend an open source alpha wallet than a closed source wallet, but that's just me. So we're consistent so far, and we like what we're hearing. But then in May of 2023, Bitcoin Keeper, the iOS wallet, announces their independent Whirlpool client, who Samourai Wallet says they're proud to welcome. Well, this closed source. So after bashing closed source wallets, rightfully, right, for being, not a great choice, now he's proud to announce that this closed source wallet has integrated Whirlpool. So here it is still not open sourced by June of that year. So here's another one, is that Tor is off by default in Samourai Wallet. Now, this one's considerably easier than Dojo to have enabled, right? It's because with Dojo, you need this whole separate device running at your house. It's not something your casual user will configure. But Samourai says he's not against Tor by default in principle. But the problem is that it would increase support costs. So I don't think this is a good reason to have privacy opt in instead of opt out, is the amount of support requests. You're a privacy wallet, right? So you should provide privacy unless something changes, right? However, and this is quite shocking because it's only 10 days later that they reply to, I believe it's Larry Lasermind, who says, if you just code the Tor switch to be on by default, that wouldn't be a problem, and it would cut the arguments of credits in half. And Samourai says, I look forward to ignoring your merge request. So just 10 days ago, he's okay with the idea of it, but now he's just going to ignore the merge request for default Tor. So it's really hard to understand what their standards are for what makes a privacy wallet a privacy wallet. So I think here's probably the most dishonest thing about Samourai Wallet is their Ricochet feature. And if you aren't familiar with Ricochet, it's a it's a tool, I guess, you could use in any wallet. What it does is you take some UTXO, you spin it to your own address, you wait a little bit, you spin it again to another one of your new addresses. And you do this like 6 times. Now, does this sound like a service you should pay for? Not really. It's, an hour worth of coding, maybe. I don't know. But Samourai would charge you 100,000 Satoshis, currently worth about $60, to send your own coins to your own addresses. Now, you pay your own mining fees too. So this is their own, I guess, coordinator fee for sending to yourself. Okay, maybe that's just a bad business idea. Maybe you're just a dumb customer if you take that. Whatever. But the problem here is this actually creates a privacy leak. If Samourai never decided to collect this fee, then this sort of transaction pattern could provide plausible deniability that these money changed hands 6 times and it has no connection to where you originally got it. But the Department of Justice indictment of Samourai mentions this. It says, Samourai collects a fee estimated to be about $3.4 million for Whirlpool and $1.1 million for Ricochet transactions.
So it wasn't such a bad business idea.
Oh, no, they made a lot of money doing it. The question is, I don't think it's very honest, because this line reveals that the government is aware of all these Ricochet transactions. They were very easily able to track it because of this $1.1 million in fees that Samourai collected from them. If they had offered this as a free feature, these users would have gotten some level of privacy. But because they wanted to collect the money, it undermined all the privacy of all these Ricochet transactions. And the government is fully happy to tell you that they're aware that they can trace them.
I don't know what to say. That sucks. And at the same time, I'm impressed and cautious of the fact that you're keeping lists of everything.
I would say that's my talent in this world is I'm a very vindictive person and I don't forget a lot of things that are said. So, but I try to apply that to myself as well. Keep my standards or apply my standards back to myself so that I'm not a hypocrite, that I move linearly in argumentation and not in circles.
That's admirable. I was gonna ask you, can you show to the audience your new avatar, your new Pepe? I think it's really cool. Your Tiger Pepe.
Yes. Let's see if I can present that again. So Annie made this for me, and it captures my likeness very well.
I was muted, sorry. So basically, if you want to get your own Pepe, reach out to my girlfriend. She needs to pay for her university fees. In medicine, it's not cheap, so she's drawing to make some money off of it. But it's fun. I guess we're starting a small tribe here. We're and now I get to see what it's like to not have a verified Twitter profile. You get a lot of advertisements and suggestions. I gotta say, the experience on the website has gotten way worse over the last few months.
Yeah, I don't know. I heavily use my muted words list and my block list. So my experience on Twitter is more or less consistent. However, you can see I am showing in my profile my InPub on Nostr. I'm a big fan of Nostr, but I'm almost a little bit disappointed that Nostr doesn't have the people at each other's throats like Twitter does, right? What makes Twitter entertaining is the drama and the dunking on each other. Um, so with Nostr, everyone's a Bitcoiner and everyone's on the same team, and it's kind of boring. So it's lovable, but not entertaining.
I do scroll through the feed on Nostr, and it used to be a ghost town for a while. It seems like after the conference in Riga, right now they're having a resurgence in terms of trying very hard to migrate towards that platform and use it as much as they can. I saw a bunch of companies post exclusive announcements on Nostr. I do like it, but it has a long way to go in terms of adoption. And I'm not going to use it all the time until the people I don't like are going to use it and we can have our fights there. But at the same time, I do see that it's dangerous that everything you post on Nostr is permanent and you cannot delete it. I do like the fact that at one point you can wipe your entire existence in terms of tweets and not have to deal with that in the future. So it's a much better way to troll if you're on Twitter. If you want to post PR or stuff that's going to be immortalized on somebody else's relay node, then I guess it's fine to use Nostr. But for stuff that you don't want to affect your future, I think it's better to tweet it out. Maybe delete it when you wake up and you're sober.
Yeah, I think the potential for Nostr is that it can apparently do everything, right? We can do the live stream there. We can put GitHub on there. You can do your chats, your Twitter, your Reddit, all these sorts of different things you can package into a Nostr client or into, I guess, multiple Nostr clients and use the same key for everything. So we have an interesting future ahead of us with those keys.
I was gonna ask you, since this is on top of your profile on Twitter, why are you such a fan of activating CTV, which is BIP 119?
So a little bit of history there. My first soft fork in Bitcoin was Segwit. I went through the block size wars, and I'm a little bit ashamed to say that I didn't really know what I was doing back then. I was pro SegWit, right? So I ended up keeping the right coin and selling the right coin, according to the market. But I was influenced by social media, right? So I had the little UASF cap, but I really didn't know anything about what I was advocating. Then Taproot came around, pro Taproot, but more cautious, right? I don't know everything I'm talking about. I'm a little bit more of an experienced Bitcoiner. So this thing is a little bit confusing, but I have a really good web of trust by now, right? And Greg Maxwell and Peter Willa and, all these really smart guys say it's cool and useful. And I look at it, scratch my head and say, well, it doesn't seem harmful, so we'll go for it. And so now we have OpCTV, OpCat, drive chains, and some kind of OpCT variants, maybe like L-enhance and TX hash. And there's I think about 10 probably in total covenant proposals, including SigHash any prov out, Tapley update verify, and just tons more, right?
There's also the Great Script Restoration Project, which aims to bring back a bunch of opcodes as a package. And I'm not against that. I think bringing builders to Bitcoin is a very noble pursuit. You should have more users, more use cases, not limit the project in its scope. Because I was going to mention this at some point during the interview. What's the point of bothering with this on-chain privacy when you can just swap ETFs, right? You get ETF shares and you transfer them to someone else, and the ownership is not stored on a public ledger permanently. So is that the scaling and privacy layer that we need? But anyway, let's talk about
Hopefully not.
covenants first and then leave that for
Right.
later.
So CTV is kind of like an origin of maybe a lot of these other covenants. And the reason it appeals to me is how simply it's explained, which is this is a pre-signed transaction, but it's enforced by consensus rules. So anything you can currently do today with a pre-signed transaction, you're just making it safer by making it an opcode. However, my enthusiasm maybe for BIP 119 specifically has waned in the presence of all these competing opcodes. Because yes, I do want covenants, but I'm not an expert in Bitcoin script. I can't tell you the difference between CTV and TX hash and L-enhance and any of these things. So when doing something as serious as a consensus change, it's not just a yes or no, it's a which one. So instead of true or false, you have A, B, C, D, E, and it's much harder to get a high score on that test. So my web of trust is telling me OpCTV is good. My intuition that it's just a pre-signed transaction says this is good. And it's better to start now than later because consensus changes take years. And just the exposure of having this in my profile will hopefully push the conversation in that direction.
Yeah, to me it's interesting because you mentioned all of these smart people from the Bitcoin space, all of these developers who made SegWit and Taproot happen. And CTV, I think, is the first proposal that comes from outside of this group. And it seems like the people from within this group, or at least their CEO, tried to take down CTV a couple of years ago. And there's actually a Telegram group that's called Cult of the Covenant. And if you want to see a masterclass on how to take down a community and an honest grassroots movement for activating that, just watch Adam Back's contributions to that conversation. And you're gonna see how he basically made them run in circles with a bunch of FUD. And he ended up with a point where he said it's not formally correct to propose it like this. You should not pursue activation like this. And then it died. For a couple of years, nobody was speaking. I mean, not nobody. There were a bunch of guys on Twitter who still carried the torch, but it seemed like a dead end. Nobody wanted that anymore. And for a while, it kept this reputation that it's an attack on Bitcoin because Jeremy wanted to pursue the speedy trial method. And that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Another one of these covenant proposals is Op Vault, which is proposed by James O'Byrne. And he recently kind of burnt out and rage quit Bitcoin a little bit. But I think he's kind of within that community of, Bitcoin Core insiders. And his proposal, he says, yeah, like this is CTV plus some other stuff. Like we want CTV. I'm in that Cult of the Covenant Telegram group. It's not that active. I wasn't there when Adam Back was making his statements.
You can backtrack.
But yeah,
just
I do.
Scroll up.
Yes.
May of 2022. That's when the action happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting here about like the right way to do a Bitcoin consensus change, because there is no right way. The first soft forks were just kind of shoved in there by Satoshi, right? Then there's this like kind of intermittent period with check sequence verify and stuff like that, where things were kind of easy. Then SegWit was the hard one. Then Taproot was the easy one again, I guess. But Jeremy Rubin did everything realistically possible for proving the merits of his proposal, especially with his Sapio, I guess, smart contracting application. So he built out these tools that use his opcode and gave them out to the community to test and build things. He wrote this advent calendar. It was like 20-something blog posts explain what you can do with CTV, plus code snippets for how to do it. So this is a lack of the Bitcoin community, I think, to understand complex things. I didn't actually see too much pushback. Maybe it's just because I'm on Twitter and not in the right places like, the mailing list or IRC or something. But the only people who opposed CTV loudly were John Carvalho and Francis Poulier.
Also Giacomo.
Okay, yes.
He referred to this as an attack.
Yes, so I do think the activation method is important here, because the precedent we established with the SegWit soft fork is that miners do not control Bitcoin. People who run nodes do.
But that's not really what happened. We can go into that if you want, but you still need miners, because if you're only going to rely on nodes, you can basically create this Sybil attack where you spin up more nodes and you get more votes. And then you're going to end up prioritizing, saying, oh, but these nodes are not economical and these are. And it's just not fair. It ends up becoming political. So that's why you still need a majority of the hash rate. These people have actual skin in the game. That
is the solution that hash rate provides, right? It is a Sybil proof mechanism. Like, you can't forge proof of work, but I can spin up a bunch of nodes. So I think that's like part of what the hats that Samson Mouse sold kind of played a part of, is if I buy the hat and I put it on, I'm a real person and I can prove that I have some interest in one way or another without actually casting a vote. So it's like a signaling method rather than a voting method. I forgot exactly where this conversation started at, where it was ending up, but
just
the block size wars
activation.
Yes. So Jeremy proposing speedy trial basically presupposes that the community is in favor, right? Is saying, hey, you guys already agreed to this, so now we just have to wait. And this is a miscalculation on Jeremy's part because people didn't understand his proposal. He, or the lack of pushback, did not indicate uh, widespread support. So I don't know what it's going to take to push the Bitcoin community there. I think ordinals and inscriptions is a positive development here because people will have to accept there's things they can't stop. And that's probably something I'm even more passionate about than Bitcoin privacy is the Bitcoin mempool getting across this idea that this is a free market and it's censorship resistant because of the money behind it. You virtue signaling on Twitter is not going to stop this free market. And you setting this filter on your node is not going to stop the free market because you're not involved in the transaction. The transaction is between the user and the miner, not you and this user or you and the miner. It's a free market that you bid for, and the highest bid speaks the loudest. And I think the Bitcoin community showed that they're not willing to put their money where their mouth is. They put their mouth all over Twitter. So I think that their failure to stop ordinals is a success case for Bitcoin that proves how censorship resistant it is.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. So I'm not a big fan of putting data on the blockchain, even though I did a bunch of ordinals. But my point is that it's permissionless and this should be kept this way. And people were saying, oh, we need more filters, we need to fix the bug. Well, the filter is the transaction fee. If you pay the transaction fee and the transaction respects the consensus rules, then it's fair game. Then what's next? Because you mentioned slippery slopes in terms of, switching down your Wasabi coordinator and then your Lightning node and then your full node and then pretty much every ability to ever send money using Bitcoin. It's pretty much the same. What's next? You're gonna shut down open timestamps? Are you gonna stop people from using up return at all? As far as I know, also Samourai Wallet was using up return for one of their use cases. So are you going
Yes,
to
so we've come full
deny
circle.
yeah, are you going to deny a lot of people that use case just because you're fanatical and you don't like this market which was developed around a certain use case? Markets have cycles. And of course, I'm pretty sure that ordinals are going to come back, just like Counterparty came back more than 8 years later after its initial conception. So,
Yeah, so I was going to give you credit for being a counterparty OG. You were in the collectibles business prior to ordinals inscriptions.
mhm.
So
But that's not OG. OG means maybe Rare Pepe, Spells of Genesis. I was there since 2021, so I missed out on the
true,
early days when people were just sending stuff without caring. Nowadays, Pepes are very collectible.
true. But I bring this up because it kind of shows a flaw in the timeline of the people who oppose these ordinals inscriptions, right, with their filters. They're under the assumption that this is some emergent new exploit or bug, right? They're lying and tricking the code. But we've had data on Bitcoin since forever. Like, okay, the Genesis block says, the Times Chancellor on the brink of bailing out banks. You have a ASCII picture of Lynn Sassaman,
Mm-hmm.
early Bitcoin developer, deep in the blockchain. I mean, there's these artifacts that go all the way back, and
You also have a
people.
bunch of inscriptions by Look Dash Jr. who put Bible verses.
This is true. Yes, I think that was in the Coinbase reward or something. So one of the critics of Ornos is Jimmy Song, right? He's a Bitcoin developer. And
Oh,
I'm
I
gonna pull up
love
this
Jimmy.
tweet.
I love Jimmy. That guy is so wrong
Uh,
so many times, time and time again, yet people still listen to him. But he said, for example, that the market will punish Luxor mining, but it only got bigger. So funny.
Correct, correct. Um, so if we go all the way back to 2017, we have this tweet from Jimmy, and he says, if you have coins digitally signed by Charlie Lee, the creator of Litecoin, that this would be worth more than your normal Litecoin. Maybe not to everyone, but Jimmy Song says he would pay extra. And that it's like a collector's item to him, and that certain pennies are worth more than others, but it doesn't mean USD is not fungible. So today, Jimmy Song will call you a scammer if you were to repeat these words back to him, right? That some certain pennies are worth others in the context of a blockchain. So he has this desire locked into himself to, go buy gimmicks, but when other people do it or other people sell gimmicks, maybe especially, this is now the greatest sin.
Well, at the time, I think Litecoin was very fashionable. It was this hero altcoin that enabled activation of SegWit on Bitcoin. There was a lot of FUD that anyone can spend these SegWit transactions and that they're not safe. And the activation on Litecoin obliterated a lot of it. To Charlie Lee's credit, he actually managed to negotiate with the miners to activate SegWit, even though Litecoin did not need this. They never had a congestion on their blockchain. And after the activation, he set up a fake, or at least a pseudonymous Reddit account, and he posted about a $1 million bounty in a SegWit address and said whoever can spend this can take the bounty. It's been there for a few months, and that year in 2017 in December, Charlie revealed that it was actually him who set it up, and it's unnecessary since it was proven that the concerns were wrong, so he's got to move the money from that address. There was so much that happened in 2017, and Litecoin was at the forefront of this activation. I also see some potential right now in Mimblewimble extension block, their MWeb implementation. It's been on their main chain for 2 years. It does a block size increase with privacy, and it's a soft fork. And I think it's huge, honestly. If you give it a try, it's pretty good. But it seems like culturally we're stuck in a place where we can't even activate a covenant. And something that increases the capacity, and it also pays fees to miners, so it's not like liquid or something. So this extension block with Mimblewimble is much better than anything else that's out there right now that's being proposed for Bitcoin. It's not as radical as adding ring signatures or trying to do a hard fork to add the Zcash cryptography. It's something that you can opt out from using altogether. And it's something that's prunable, so it doesn't, just because you have larger blocks on the Mimblewimble extension block, it doesn't mean you have to store everything. You can just store a few gigabytes of data. It's very, very cool. And I'm so disappointed because this was proposed by Andrew Polstra back in 2016 for Bitcoin. I actually interviewed him about it and he said he lost interest in the project. It's much better than nothing. And it seems like Bitcoin is in this ivory tower situation where we say, oh, it's just not good enough. Well, when is it good enough? And what is good enough? You're waiting for a holy grail to just emerge. And what if we get that, but the culture has changed to the point that everyone wants Bitcoin to stay ossified? And I'm sort of afraid of that.
Yeah, I looked into Mimblewimble and Monero and Zcash sort of at the beginning of my or when I first started getting serious about Bitcoin, right, in 2017. I think maybe Mimblewimble was a little bit after that, but um, my understanding, or well, let me ask you this question first. If you could rank the three, I don't know anything about NIM or Zeno, but I do know a little bit about Litecoin and Monero and Zcash. So if you could rank those three against each other for privacy, which one would be at the top, middle, bottom?
Well, you have different metrics. If you rank in terms of liquidity, I think Litecoin comes first because you find it on every exchange, you find it at every ATM, and you can peg your coins into MWeb. And basically, when you make a payment, even to an ATM or whatever, you peg out, and it looks like this transaction that comes out of a large address that holds a lot of funds on the clear net, to call it like this, on the base layer. So in terms of liquidity, Litecoin is first. In terms of overall privacy, Monero is first. But in terms of advancement of privacy or the best overall cryptography, it's Zcash. And right now they're trying these unified addresses to move away from that situation where you had clear addresses and shielded addresses. They're having this situation with a setup of unified addresses. They use much better cryptography. They can be used on mobile wallets, which was an issue before, because prior, maybe a couple of years ago, you would only have the shielded addresses on your full node. And that was an issue. They could not make it work on mobile phones. And now they have it. It's just that I think Zcash is this long-term science project, which keeps getting better and gets closer to its purpose, but the market sort of loses its patience and loses focus. And Monero, for example, integrated an idea about how to add more deniability. It's called full blockchain or
Full
something.
membership proofs. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those proofs are actually taken from Zcash, and they're eliminating some of that need for decoys in ring signatures. They're increasing their anonymity set. I think it's like a dozen right now. You have a dozen decoys and the real transaction, maybe more, like 19 or something. They're doing something much better right now, and it's due to the research that was done by Zcash. I think even Ethereum right now is using research by Zcash, and we can also get on Bitcoin those ZK rollups, and there are a bunch of teams working to bring that in a way that's trust minimized and actually use BitVM. We're living very exciting times, but at the same time, we also seem to be culturally stuck in a situation where even if the coolest technology gets built, there are not too many users willing to try that.
Yeah, so that was something that happened recently, was the shutdown of 10.10.1. You interviewed a member of their team recently.
Philip
And
Honish, yeah.
yes. And this was a project I was following for a long time. They had renamed at one point. They were previously Itchy Sats. And I like the idea of self-custodial trading. But yeah, it's sad that that didn't take off. And I'm wondering where the UX friction there was. For me, it was that they didn't allow US users. So I didn't want to have to do all the VPN stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if the Bitcoin community appreciates any of these more complex systems being built on top of Bitcoin. So this is something about drive chains that Paul likes to say, is that we're going to get all the altcoin features on Bitcoin as a drive chain extension. But I've been around in Bitcoin for a long time. I haven't run into a use case on an altcoin yet that I'm like, damn, too bad I'm on Bitcoin because I really wanted to use that. Privacy is obviously something where Bitcoin's base layer lacks, but with application layer tech, you can get around that with Wasabi. So I just haven't found the appeal of altcoins. Maybe there's like some cool blockchain game out there that is beyond my wildest dreams, and I couldn't even imagine how cool it would be. But when is it going to get here to Bitcoin? I don't know. And you mentioned liquidity. So here's some coping we hear from Bitcoiners about Monero's liquidity. They'll say, oh, you can't use your Monero for a private transaction because you're going to cash out to Bitcoin, and then you're going to be revealed that way. and there's just not enough Monero liquidity for you to hide within. And this is just kind of insane. Because like Monero has like a $4 billion market cap. And how many users of Monero do these Bitcoiners think there are, to where I can just guess out of how many people do you think there are? Like 5 people using Monero, that your liquidity is not deep enough to do this. So I think this is like the sort of nastiness we saw in between Samourai and Samourai and Wasabi, is that Bitcoiners aren't willing to admit that there's a way that you can improve, even with trade-offs, that you can improve on what Bitcoin has, right? At least you can get worse, right? You can get worse privacy in the Bitcoin by being Ethereum, but that's about it.
Yeah, right now I'm at a point where I see 2 possible outcomes for the future. We either have this Bitcoin maximalist future where everything that has been ever experimented and has a legit use case that has real market demand is going to get built on Bitcoin. Or we're going to have a future where you have all of these alt chains and efficient ways to swap between coins so that you get from one network to the other to benefit from the advantages that are not on the Bitcoin base layer. And it seems like right now in the current culture, we're more likely to face the latter, for the simple reason that there's a lot of market liquidity that stays away from Bitcoin because of some cultural differences. As far as I can understand, Ethereum for many years has been like this revenge chain for a bunch of companies that signed the New York Agreement, and they were not happy with the way that development went, so they said, okay, everything that we wanted to do on Bitcoin, let's do it on Ethereum, and let's fund these developers to do cool stuff, to build everything that they want to build, and we'll definitely make some money off of it. And I'm pretty sure that companies like Coinbase did. For many years, it was a joke within the community that Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, refused to tweet the word Bitcoin. He was always saying crypto, even when referring to Bitcoin. I think he came around recently. But it's still sad, that we have this situation where we need to have fights, and you have a Lord of the Flies sort of situation all the time, with new influencers emerging and slaying the old ones who are not pure enough, and you have this pursuit of purity where nobody is pure enough, and if you find that someone was shitcoining at some point, then they're gonna get expelled from the community and they can't be cool enough, they don't get invited to conferences, they don't get the spotlight. It's funny and interesting at the same time, because some people are so good at playing this game that they can get away with anything, like Max Kaiser or whatever. That guy had his own coin. He wasn't just shilling a random shitcoin, even though he did like Dash, and he did a bunch of others. So whoever watched his show is very much aware of the stuff that he promoted. But now they're seriously buying into his new persona, in which he's saying, yeah, look at me. Everything that's not Bitcoin is an unregistered security in this country. And you can go to jail even for ordinal inscriptions, which honestly are just Bitcoin UTXOs. It's just insane where it got. And we have to either accept that Bitcoin cannot do everything and say, these networks have been around for longer than a decade. Let's just agree that they're fine and they're not scams. Or we try to bring everything to Bitcoin. But if we have so much resistance to change, and even basic upgrades get labeled as a tax, and then you spend years proving that they're very limited in their scope, like it was the case of CTV, and still you have a bunch of people who are holding back any activation conversation, I don't know. My conspiracy theory about CTV is that the guys at Blockstream are working on a complete rewrite with a couple of extra efficiency benefits, and they're going to propose that, and it's going to get consensus, and they will say, we came up with this. And we, as a company, are still the ones that innovate. It's not some outsider who came up with the way to move Bitcoin forward.
Yeah, so Blockstream is an interesting name because back in 2017 they were the scapegoat for the big blockers, basically. That Blockstream can't be trusted. They're trying to cripple Bitcoin in order to promote their sidechain Liquid or their science project Lightning. And then we didn't see Liquid take off, right? There was so much said about it, but users just didn't want it. And I'm wondering if it's because it's custodial, right? It's a federation. And that just doesn't fit in the pocket of Bitcoiners, right? Or that their focus was on exchange to exchange transfers. So that you don't have the whale alert bot, telling you that so many Bitcoins are now being deposited into Poloniex or something.
Oh, but exchanges want that because they know that whenever that happens, they can manipulate the market sentiment. So they do like that.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting as well. As a blockchain analyst, how do these whale bots work? Because if you're reusing an address, okay, that's really obvious, right? But how do you know the recipient of an address while the transaction is still unconfirmed, right? Maybe after the recipient spends it, you can run some heuristics, but a brand new fresh address has no footprint. How could you know if it's an exchange or which one? So you'd either have to rely on address reuse or just assume that coins that had previously been sent to Bitfinex, change outputs from that, are going back to Bitfinex or something. But yeah, like the web bots are always they're a fun part of Bitcoin culture, especially when it's fake news, right? We love them.
Yeah, anyway, I just want to mention this on the show, and then I'm going to ask you about blockchain analysis and how it works and what are the plausible ways in which they can guess what's happening and what are the limitations to it. But I just want to say that I saw Michael Saylor buying a lot of Bitcoin for MicroStrategy again today. And my memory of Michael Saylor, I'm not sure if you also keep tabs or records of what he's saying and what he's been doing, but less than 1 year into his involvement, he created that North American Mining Council, and he was working hard to regulate mining in the US to be more compliant, to be more green, to be more likable according to the standards imposed by a bunch of autocrats, honestly. And he also did some stuff which was confirmed that he denied a certain ETF to provide money, funding to Bitcoin Core developers because he considered it would be perverse for the coders to get paid or something. Or he thought that, of course, the justification is always that you don't want that one company to control development. But for what it's worth, I'm well aware that Saylor has been stalling improvements to Bitcoin, and he's a voice that can effectively shut down any BIP or any idea that can turn into a soft fork. So if he dislikes something, I think he's at a point where he's politically powerful enough to make it not happen. And I don't think the community is gonna fork off and say, Michael Saylor, just have your compliant fork and enjoy your parties with Larry Fink and stuff like that, and we're gonna enjoy our own cypherpunk utopia. I don't think that's going to happen. And at this point, I think it's worth addressing the question, did Bitcoin become proof of stake? Because you have the entities with the largest amount of coins that are saying, I put a lot of money into this, don't mess it up. And then you're not going to get development anymore.
So I would push back on that. I don't think Michael Saylor actually has a lot of sway. He's not a technical person. He's famous for being a degenerate gambler, basically. Like he went all in on Bitcoin, borrowed a bunch of money, went all in on Bitcoin, borrowed a bunch more money. And this doesn't like there's no proof of stake, so he doesn't have any direct impact on consensus with this. Um, I heard the rumor that he was trying to like pull the plug on funding for developers or something, but what leverage does he have to make that sort of threat? He's just a rich guy, right? He doesn't. I guess like I don't know who he can lean on to make other people not spend the money the way they want. But I do agree the culture can be stuck, right? To where people say, oh, I just want number go up. I don't want utility. I don't want to spend this. Like that's something I really crave is the ability to spend my Bitcoin on food, right? And I can with, gift cards from Bitrefill or something. But that's not the pure way to do it, right? Um, it's the middleman, and it'll get me what I want, but it doesn't change the world. So we need to get Bitcoin to the point where it replaces fiat. That it's not just something to speculate on. Shinobi posted recently, I thought it was really smart. He says people can speculate on anything. Bitcoin is not special. Number will not go up until you provide them real utility. So you have a kind of a pessimistic outlook in that privacy coins will go up because they're suddenly going to become a very utilized currency because of crackdowns on by the Kamala regime.
Well,
So
now it
we'll
goes
see
way
if we
beyond
live in
that
that.
because you also have the situation in Brazil, and you have lots of places in the world where tyranny becomes the norm. And of course, people don't want to transact in a way that can be tracked. And you can argue that they can use Wasabi Wallet, but they do need to understand how Bitcoin works before they can attempt to be 100% sure that they're not going to be de-anonymized.
Yeah, I guess it does take a while to get from brand new Bitcoiner on the exchange all the way to privacy maximus, right? And it doesn't even stop at Wasabi Wallet, right? Because if we're considering our adversary here as the state, this is the most powerful surveillance apparatus in world history, right? I'm talking to you on two different devices right now, and probably both of them are watching me, recording what I'm saying, and
Well,
sending
you're
it
live
directly
on
to the
YouTube and
NSA.
Twitter, so they don't even have to bother.
Right. So it's going directly to the NSA before it gets to YouTube. But so I don't know if humanity as a whole has what it takes to survive direct crackdown, given what we saw in COVID. Um, Maybe that's a little pessimistic, but it plays into your investment thesis. So
Well, you
making it
said
as
my
easy as
investment
possible.
thesis is pessimistic, but it's actually optimistic on humanity. Whereas you're pessimistic on humanity, but optimistic on Bitcoin.
I suppose. But you made this really good point in the past that Bitcoin's censorship censorship resistance can be taken advantage of because of the lack of privacy, right? You said that miners can see where transactions came from. So what about Satoshi Nakamoto, right? Even if he has CoinJoins, even if he has Wasabi Wallet, right? Those coins have to come out of his addresses where we know they already exist, right? So the miners can just say, if you sell those coins, my investment goes to zero. I'm just going to block your coins and just hope that works. So like you can have these sort of crazy situations, right? Game theory wise, that you maybe can't exactly tell what's going to happen next.
I was actually thinking
Um,
about this in the shower yesterday. It's a weird coincidence, but people were making fun of Vitalik for selling his Ethereum, and they were saying, "Oh, it's so nice that Satoshi never sells his coins." And I was thinking, these people are so crazy that they would not grant Satoshi the right to sell his coins if he ever came back, because they would say, oh, Bitcoin got hacked, let's hard fork and move to a new network which restores to the previous state where Satoshi's coins are untouched. Because they're so used to this narrative that they are there and they're probably lost, or Satoshi is dead, or he is this genius who is selfless, that even if the real Satoshi would come back and spend his coins, people would fork off and say, this is not the way it should be. Maybe it was some quantum computer, maybe it was something else that cracked the wallets. Satoshi is not around us anymore, so let's hard fork and not enable this person the right to sell his coins.
Yeah, yeah. So, and one other thing I want to point out in regards to blockchain analysis is there was another smaller case with a guy named, they're all named Roman, so I hope I get this right, Roman Sterlingov. And he was accused of operating a centralized mixer called Bitcoin Fog. And he recently went to trial, and his defense was that he was not the operator, right? He was just denying he had any involvement. And he ended up losing this case because of evidence provided by chain analysis or some chain analysis service that connected him to, I guess, the origin transactions or something for this mixer. And we saw Bitcoin Twitter, blow up and say, oh my God, this is pseudoscience. I can't believe they would convict someone on just guesses made by some blockchain analysis company. So here's the problem, is that we don't have access to this analysis that they did. So we can't confirm or deny that this guy actually is connected or not. But Bitcoiners' instinct, their reaction, is to deny it's possible, right? Bitcoin is perfect. You can't trace this guy. Blockchain analysis doesn't work. But experienced Bitcoiners who know better will say, oh, it is absolutely traceable, and you have to be very careful. You need to use labels. You need to do CoinJoins. You need to just, it's a minefield out there. So it's bad to see the Bitcoin community double down on a myth as opposed to rally to Roman's defense and say, hey, maybe this guy was Bitcoin Fog, and we support him doing that. Financial privacy is a right, and we like this guy for giving it to us. Instead, they decided to water down this defense and deny it was him to begin with. So let's say this chain analysis conclusively proves 100% with like a reuse address or something that this guy is the Bitcoin Fog operator. Then the Bitcoin community looks like a bunch of morons, right? They were denying that this ever occurred or was possible. And there was a smoking gun. And now they're just going to be coping if they come up with a backup argument and say, okay, well, you did get the right guy, but you should let him go anyway. Start with the strongest argument. Say, this guy, whether he did it or not, let him go.
Yeah,
sorry to end on a pessimistic note.
makes a lot of sense. And I did speak with a bunch of people who had to deal with Chainalysis, the company, and they said, they were able to correctly guess what I did with my wallet. So there is a lot of guessing there. Of course, there's deniability. But honestly, they got pretty good at this. And as privacy services are shutting down on Bitcoin, it only becomes easier for them to operate. Because maybe this setup where you had Wasabi and Samourai and Join Market and maybe a bunch of other centralized mixers operating, maybe it wasn't nice for one company to have competition. It wasn't nice for liquidity to be split around. But at the same time, it was great because it was harder for blockchain analysis to do its job. They had to identify the type of CoinJoin. They had to do more work. Now they don't have to do as much work.
Mm-hmm. And so a good thing about these multiple things existing is, yes, it does split up the liquidity, but there are a few users who mix from one to the other. So they'll start in Whirlpool, go to Wasabi, and I've seen several instances of that. So you asked earlier what the most reliable ways to track people on the blockchain are. And I have a list here. Number one on the list is address reuse. There's no way to get around that. You have to generate a new address for every transaction you receive.
That's also in the white paper, by the way. That's the way Satoshi wanted you to use Bitcoin. Just generate a new address. That's what he did. He always mined to a new address. That's why there is no one address that has 1 million Bitcoin. It's just an assumption that was made by someone that these addresses should belong to Satoshi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so in the Bitcoin white paper, it goes on to say the next reliable or most reliable tracking heuristic is common input ownership. So if you have multiple inputs in a transaction, you just assume they're all the same person. And this is what CoinJoins break, right? Not especially PayJoins, but PayJoins do this in a really unique way. Then the next way that you would track someone is by following the change output. So when you spin an input, your address looks like BC1Q, blah, 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 or BC1P, or might start with a 3 or a 1. So there's all these different formats, right? And then on the output side of the transaction, you're going to have the recipient and the change. The change output is basically always going to have the same format as the input that created the transaction, right? So just right off the bat, just by looking at a transaction, you can tell who's the recipient and who's the change. Then you have some other things that, let's say all the script types are the same. We're all using BC1Q. Now what? Well, then you could check, is there a round payment amount, right? If I send you exactly 1 million Satoshis for one input, and then some 0.123456789 on the second one, you would assume that one's the change because it's some arbitrary amount as opposed to some deliberate round value. Then your change address, once again, if we have these same script types, there's still the version and the lock time and the RBF flag and all these other sorts of transaction fingerprints that will reveal which output belongs to the recipient, which one to the sender. And these are the most reliable ones. Then the one that's less reliable is a one output transaction. This can be interpreted in two different ways. It's either a self-transfer, someone consolidating all their own inputs, right? Or it's a spend. If it's a spend, then that means that the user's either buying something, they have the exact amount of money they need, or they're like just depositing everything into an exchange, right? With no leftovers. But basically this is where the guessing comes in for chain analysis, is whenever there's a one input transaction, you don't know if money changed hands or just moved between one person's wallets. So all these things put together, especially if you have KYC info, or if you're running a public Electrum server to look up people's addresses when they're syncing their nodes or their wallets, then you can start to trace a huge amount of the Bitcoin network activity, right? There's not that much of it. Blocks are not that big. So looking at 3,000 transactions or something is not that hard.
Yeah, I think that was one of the best breakdowns I've had on the show of how blockchain analysis works. And I gotta ask you, why do you know so much about it?
I guess because I want to audit my own transactions. On top of my Twitter profile, I have kind of a flamboyant cartoon with the Chad and Virgin meme. And it has the Virgin is all sad because he's paying taxes to the IRS, and the Chad is very happy because he's keeping all his money. So you don't want to find out later that you don't have privacy you thought you had in the first place. So this is actually something that happened with the Samourai guys, right? Let me scroll up a little bit on my notes because I have the links to it.
So are you gonna bring up the links? Because I have to switch screens.
Not yet, and my battery's dying, so I probably just need to get through this kind of quick. So there's a Twitter account called Phone BTC, FONE BTC. This account is older than Samourai Dev, right? But it's Samourai Dev's account. And he used this as a sock puppet, right, to attack other wallets and whatnot. And one of the funny things he did was enter in a Reddit giveaway on this account along with the Samourai Wallet account at the same time, right? So both Phone BTC and Samourai Wallet or Samourai Dev post their on-chain addresses on this Reddit giveaway. He double collects the money, and he's smart because he spends them individually without merging the two inputs, right? But they're both spent at the exact same block height with the exact same fee. And like all these other little fingerprints that make it possible to determine on chain, these people have to be the same. And it's just, it's kind of pathetic that Samourai Wallet would, or Samourai Dev would, instead of allowing one additional person to be onboarded to Bitcoin, he wanted to collect from the giveaway twice. So that's kind of greedy, but whatever. But like these sorts of little things you don't realize until it's too late, right? Because it wasn't until years later that Nopara is analyzing and says, I caught you, right? You two are the same person, and you've been ganging up on people online, pretending to be multiple people, right? So, yeah, like there's better reasons to conceal your identity, which is so you don't pay taxes. But in this particular case, they were trying to conceal that identity to play a trick on social media users and deceive them.
That's funny. You have records about pretty much everything. I guess we could record an entire 2-hour episode in which you just reveal sock puppet activity from the Samourai guys. But we're not gonna. I don't think that's interesting. And right now, I think the Samourai developers are sort of martyrs, so it's not cool to take shots at them because they
yes,
did.
And I don't want to shit on them and kick them when they're down because they're victims, right? They were targeted by the government. But just because they're victims doesn't mean they're heroes, right? They did a bunch of attacking against innocent Bitcoin builders, right? Especially builders of other privacy projects, right? So I would say they're victims, but not heroes. If you want to, I'll shout them out. P2Prights.org, I believe, is their donation for their court case. I'm going to be a pessimist here and say there's 7 million prisoners in the US, right? Bitcoiners feeding all their money to fight the government on their own turf in their own courtroom is probably not that smart. If you want to support the Samourai, I would say you should go run your own CoinJoin coordinator and just prove that you can't stop them, right? So
I think that would actually strengthen their case in court. They can say, it's just software. We created this, but anyone can use it for any use case.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think if the Samourai fanboys really thought their privacy tool was as great as they say it was, then they would go out and run their own coordinators, but they didn't. So
it's funny how narratives work at the same time. Because you have a bunch of users on Twitter and they pretend that Samourai was shut down because it was the only one that worked, right? And now, since it's shut down and nobody's running it, there is no more privacy on Bitcoin.
Right. I would hate to live in that world where I thought that Bitcoin was basically defeated on April 24th, 24. I'm glad that it wasn't, but there must be people out there who do think that, right? Maybe they all switched to Monero. Who knows?
There's someone who's trolling me right now. His name is KYC Free, and he has this Marvin the Martian avatar. And I was just trolling him right now because he said, "Oh, Vlad, you're here to hand Monero to the US government or whatever." He posted this meme of a Trojan horse. And I'm just posting gifs of Bugs Bunny making fun of Marvin the Martian because that's his avatar. Anyway, these people are funny. They went to Monero. It's none of my business what they're doing. It's just that they're
Yeah.
a bit misguided and ideological where they should be more rational. But I was going to ask you, since I don't think we should go on with the gossip for too long, and I want to ask you which Bitcoin soft forks that are being proposed right now do you support and think that they're going to bring much better privacy for Bitcoin?
I think I'm a little bit out of my expertise here because we don't do any scripting with CoinJoins. It's a partially signed Bitcoin transaction, right? You're just filling in a template. So with scripting, the possibilities are conditional, right? It's, you know, if this signature says this, then release coins here. Then add this time lock, then add this multi-sig. Like, so you get this really complex possibilities. And I would love to see CTV or some sort of covenant introduce usable shared UTXOs onto Bitcoin, because I think you could surpass, you know, any of the privacy we have with coin joins where you can't tell users apart because they're all sitting in the same address. That's just another level of power. And I hopefully we'll get there.
Here's something very underrated in Bitcoin privacy. It used to be, and I think that one is still around, Mercury Wallet. And now it's Mercury Layer. And it's using state chains to swap ownership of coins. And I was wondering if you looked into that and if you think that's worth giving a try.
I've looked into it a little bit. I'm certainly not an expert on it, but let me try and explain what my concept of the system is and where I don't think it works great. So a state chain works with deleted keys, and it has an operator. And as long as the operator and the person who deleted the key don't collude, then there can be no theft. However, I think this relies on some sort of like special hardware, like Intel SGX or something that does key deletion. And I'm no hardware expert. I can't tell you if this is possible, if it's impossible. But the idea of deleting a key, or just in general, the idea of someone keeping a secret for you is a bit unsettling to me. So I think that state chains also have like fixed denominations, right? So you have a state chain pool of like 1 million sats, and you always just pass 1 million sat denomination tokens around. Maybe there's potential there. I won't shit on it, but I don't necessarily see the appeal.
I was going to mention that we exceeded 1,500 views. I'm not sure if they're continuous, but they're just views that have been added. I know there's this three-letter... I can't talk anymore. There's this three-letter agent who's watching us, and I just want to say hello to you. If you're a fan of my work, you can send a donation. I can put up an address. You can track it all you want. I will not spend it. I will just look at it and take pride in it. Or you can just meet me outside of the building and I'll buy you a beer after this interview. It can be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And I was going to ask you, I gave you an address when we started this interview. You said you were going to send this anonymous transaction to it. Did anything happen?
No, it has not been paid yet. So I'm looking at my logs right now, and it says uh, overall balance must not be negative. So my wallet was trying to send you more money than I actually had, and it failed. So this is, I mean, just a code problem. It's not a protocol one. I mean, there could have been protocol problems, right? We could have had someone double spin the transaction. Um, we could have had someone DOS the server. So there are ways that interactive transactions can fail in the worst case, but this is just a code problem. So I'm afraid I have lost my bet and able to send it in time.
It's fine. If it's going to arrive, I'm going to tweet about it and challenge others to take a look. Because I think it's an interesting activity to look at the mempool and look at the blockchain and try to link transactions. And this can also be something optimistic for the users out there. But as proven by our attempt tonight, it's not super reliable. So even if you know what you're doing and you have all the software stack and the hardware for it, you can't do this within, I guess we did this 2 hours ago. So it's not fast enough. It's very hard for me to blame people for using Monero, Zcash, or something else when it's a lot faster and it just gives them the result at a lower cost in terms of both time and monetary spending.
Yep, I can definitely see the appeal. I'm curious. There's recently a headline about Monero, like some chain analysis video
Oh, did you watch that?
describing how to. I didn't actually get to see the original source,
It's on
but my
archive.org. I can send you the link.
okay, I'd be happy to. Um, but yeah, so I guess their tactics had to do with like network analyzation, right? If you look at where a transaction originates or the IP address or something.
That's the way in which they could identify that particular transaction. So it was a mistake on the side of the user. But it was also, so something interesting was that they were able to take down a couple of decoys.
Hmm.
So they were able to say, this was a decoy and this and this. That's where they say they de-anonymized, but at the same time, they don't know how many coins were sent and they don't know to whom it was sent and where it comes from. So
Right.
that's the whole point. No, they were able to determine the sender because of the IP address leak. So it was a network level issue from the user. But
Yep. And
it
this is
wasn't.
exactly what the critics of like Samourai were so gung ho about, right? Is that if you don't solve the network level stuff, it doesn't matter what privacy tools you build on top of it because you're giving away your information at a lower level. I
Yeah, and
guess one more
they
thing I wanted to
shove
ask
at your
about.
face that whole philosophy of, oh, you selectively reveal what you want. And if you want to reveal your IP address, it's your choice. We're not going to force you to use Tor. I actually have high hopes for NIM. I'm not sure if you're following that one. But if they do manage to pull off their VPN, they're trying to have the first product of their mixnet. And if their VPN becomes super popular, that can actually be more reliable than Tor, and it's incentivized in a way that you can make some money running that node, just like you spin up coordinators in Wasabi.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not familiar with NIM. I think the other one you're a fan of is Zano. Are either of these proof of work coins?
Zano is this weird proof of work, proof of stake hybrid. So they have one block that's proof of work, one that's proof of stake. They alternate between them. It's their tactic for, I guess, proof of work generates the thermodynamic security. Proof of stake makes people hodl, so it's easier to pump the price, I guess. It's part of the pumponomics of the project. But
Okay. So if I haven't gotten canceled yet, let's see if I can get canceled now and say I'm interested in the idea of tail emission for Bitcoin because proof of work is still kind of an unproven system once it converts entirely to fees. So I was asking, like, what are the consensus systems of these other altcoins? Because I would be curious if there's any other way to solve like the Byzantine general's problem in a decentralized way other than proof of work. Because proof of stake, people misunderstand this as an earning mechanism, that they think that they're earning interest on their coins, so the yield or something. However, this is not the case. Proof of stake is the opposite. It's a penalty system. Instead of with proof of work, where you're rewarded for participating in consensus, in proof of stake, you're penalized for not participating in consensus with inflation via the staked coins that you're missing out on, right? So I'm not sure if there's any alternative model to these two. I'm still not convinced you can solve the nothing at stake problem, but it'd be fascinating if there was an innovation that would replace the actual part of Bitcoin that makes it Bitcoin, which is proof of work, right? Like the digital signatures and blah, blah, blah. Like you can do that on any currency, but like the proof of work is the concept, is the bedrock that makes Bitcoin Bitcoin.
I heard a very avant-garde hypothesis from Paul Piui, who is the CEO of Edge Wallet. And he spends a lot of time dabbling in these privacy projects. And he told me that he sees the future of Bitcoin as being entirely on top of an L2. He thinks that the base layer is unnecessary and it's going to get stripped off. At one point, mining will no longer make economic sense. And it will be very hard to justify that you're continuing with this. So it was part of the fair issuance of the currency, and after that point onwards, it can become an L2.
That's interesting. However, an L2 generally describes a scaling mechanism rather than a consensus mechanism. So you still have to figure out a way to decide what is the current state of everyone's balances. Everyone has to agree on that, and there has to be some method that you can reproduce. So, no matter how much lightning there is, there's still going to be that underlying thing pinning the whole system.
It's funny that it took us 2.5 hours to mention Lightning.
Wow, I think you're right. Maybe we mentioned it briefly with Phoenix, but maybe not directly. Yeah, that's crazy.
We haven't said the word Lightning. And you get people like Super Testnet who say, oh, Lightning is super private, but it's only for the sender, not for the receiver. And if you think Lightning is private, take a look at the Lightning Torch website, where they were able to assess where the person comes from, whether or not they used their full node, and what kind of wallet they used. They even have Blue Wallet, Wallet of Satoshi mentioned. So you have all of this network data that gets leaked when you participate these schemes and you don't think about it. And I think this marketing around Lightning that it's private is just wrong.
So I'd say maybe it's closer to confidential than private. So I've sent you a Lightning payment before, and
oh, do you remember why?
Yeah. So the sender here has like good privacy. The receiver, you would reveal your UTXO unless you use a wrapped invoice, a blinded path, or Bolt 12, which uses blinded paths. So these are all kind of recently deployed in Phoenix and a couple other wallets. So I think we are getting there, especially with like splicing. Like Phoenix is a powerhouse here. Actually, I can't speak highly enough about them, because splicing makes all of your Lightning channels pay joins, right? To where the change of your transaction is just a new Lightning channel. And that's the coolest thing ever. And its blockchain is efficient, or so really cool. But yeah, my point that Lightning is confidential instead of private. Normally, you're going to have some LSP in between the end user and whoever is sending or receiving money with them. And if you have a direct channel with that LSP on both sides, then they know exactly where it originated and exactly where it ended up, because they're the only middleman in between. So you only gain privacy on Lightning from extending the length of your route, which is not what Lightning is designed to do. Lightning is designed to shorten the length of your route for efficiency reasons, right? So until we see a Lightning client that maybe allows users to build their own routes or something crazy like that, you won't have the robust privacy guarantees that something maybe like a Wasabi CoinJoin or Monero or something. But rather you have, okay, like as long as all 3 people on my route don't leak information about my payment, then I'm good. So I need these 3 people to collude, and as long as they don't, then I'm okay. Which is kind of similar to how Tor works, right? Tor has a 3 hops with encrypted layers. Collusion could de-anonymize you, but with enough liquidity, you don't have to worry about that.
That is a possibility, but at the same time, it's so disappointing that Lightning never got that much traction. At its peak, it was maybe 6,000 BTC out of 19 million. That hurts when you think about it, given how much hype and how much publicity and how much money was spent building it. It just never took off.
So there is a little bit of a caveat there, in that that's the publicly announced Lightning Network capacity. So most people, like on your wallet on your phone, those are all unannounced channels. Doesn't mean they're fully private from a blockchain perspective. You need, Taproot channels and some other stuff there to hide that. But basically, you don't get the full picture just from that. And like you said, this seems really small, right? 5,000 Bitcoins, given the hype? Because Wasabi's total on-chain amount is like 13,000 Bitcoins, right? It's 2.5 times that. But Wasabi, I wouldn't say has as big of a user base as Lightning, I don't think. So it's also different economics here, right? With Lightning, I don't need to lock up huge amounts of Bitcoin because I'm only spending little bits of it at a time. A 20 Satoshi zap or a 5,000 Satoshi coffee or something. So don't let those numbers underwhelm you. But also keep an eye on it, because we don't want people going to like wallet of Satoshi, right? So this actually does reflect real users using Lightning rather than custodian adoption.
Speaking of custodial, that's a whole rabbit hole with Fediments and eCash. Cashew, I think that it's called. But I think it's cool. It gives some privacy. Our conversation is about privacy, so we should be happy about that. But at the same time, it defeats the purpose of why we got into Bitcoin in the first place. We're just reinventing banking.
Right. So I get the rationale for why people decide that they want to develop eCash, is because they say custodians are going to exist anyway, so we might as well make them private. But I think by launching this technology, you're not going to draw users out of existing custodial systems to your private custodial system. You're going to draw people out of existing privacy systems that are non-custodial and move them into your private custodian. So the appeal is the privacy, not the custodian. And I don't think people are unsatisfied with their custodians enough that they would switch to a privacy preserving one.
You have a good point there. But they raised so much money, once again. Just Fediment raised $21 million to build something which is very much like Liquid, but applied differently.
And I think it's kind of funny that people make a distinction between like Fediment and Cashew and all these different eCash systems based on whether or not it's federated or a single person operating the mint. Either way is a custodian. So I don't actually see an advantage here besides just spreading out the trust. I think it was about a month or two ago, we saw a Federation for Mutiny wallet that had their DNS canceled or something, and users could no longer redeem their tokens. So there's this rug pull that even this honest operator couldn't provide the service to their customers. So there's a lot of issues with custodians being able to say, oh, we got hacked, or just reputation is not something that blockchains are supposed to deal with.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. It feels like I've used you for the last 30 minutes just to vent about stuff that makes me upset about the current state of Bitcoin. You also asked me something about NIM, and I did not forget, and I have to get the record straight. NIM is basically a security token that is basically the fuel that you use for buying more VPN time. So think of it as a Chuck E. Cheese token. That's what it is. But Chuck E. Cheese pizza is very delicious because it's the most advanced privacy mechanism for the network that you're using. They have a VPN out there right now. They have two options with 2 hops and 5 hops. They're aiming to become more decentralized than Tor is, and they're also incentivizing people to run nodes by giving them more Chuck E. Cheese tokens. So by purchasing these, you're only speculating on future use cases, and the token is registered in Switzerland as a security. So
Okay.
it's not
that sounds
an
like a
absolute
fine
scam.
business model. It sounds like a fine business model, but I fail to see maybe what the blockchain does here, because I have IVPN and I go and buy, a year worth of credit from them, and I pay with Lightning. So if I want to buy a VPN from NIM, right, then presumably there's a provider. But if you say that there's these nodes, maybe if they're all working together, this could be cool. But I don't know.
Yeah, you're not paying to a provider per se. You're paying to the other nodes, which are going to receive the rewards for operating. It's supposed to be sustainable this way because MixNet, the whole concept, also comes from David Chaum, just like Chaumian mixing for CoinJoins. And it's basically a more decentralized version of Tor. That's the best way to describe it. The problem is that all the experiments that came before failed because there was no incentive to keep running. And it was also politically dangerous. And in this environment, they're gambling on this idea that privacy is essential nowadays. It's not just a luxury. It's not just the concern of a bunch of internet nerds. It's something that people need to use. And it's something for which people are more than willing to pay if it's decentralized enough. And some people will also run infrastructure. I think it deserves a chance. I remember they had a presentation at the Baltic Honey Badger last year, and there was the guy from Swan Bitcoin, Terrence, and he was so disappointed, saying, "Oh, I can't believe that." Or was it Hackers Congress? One of the two. It was within 2 weeks, and my memory is fuzzy. But he came out and said, "Oh, I'm so disappointed." And I told him, in the case of Tor, which everyone holds in high regards for privacy, do you have any idea who runs the exit nodes? And how many of these are run by free letter agencies and embassies and the people who have all the resources to unpeel the onion and take all the steps back to identify who's using this. So you have to really assume that your adversary when you're using Tor is not the government and is just some corporation that's tracking you, like Amazon or Facebook or whatever, because most likely they're not gonna bother to de-anonymize that instance. But if your adversary has all the resources and is very interested in what you're doing, you're probably not private, and something much powerful is needed.
Yeah, I can't speak to the security of Tor. Um,
But you can also have
Everything that
NIM into
Wasabi
Tor,
does.
for example, just like you can have VPN into Tor, you can have NIM into
Okay.
Tor, and you're basically gonna wait 20 minutes for a page to load, but it's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, see, I don't know that much about how Tor is built. I just kind of take it for granted that it's private, right? Because everything Wasabi does for privacy, it does over Tor. So if Tor doesn't work, Wasabi doesn't work. And there's just needs redesigning from the ground up if that were the broken part. um, so I'm running my own Tor relay, which is something I did like a month ago. So I'm running an exit node. So it says I have a probability of 0.001%, I guess, of being picked as your exit relay.
Are you sure it's
So it
an
seems like
exit
a pretty,
relay and not just another relay?
yeah, I originally set it up as a middle relay. And then after it was running for a week, I'm like, okay, let me turn on exit node too. So yeah.
You're a brave man. I don't know what to say. You're fighting the fight, or else you're a Fed. I don't know. It's one of the two.
Well, gotta be brave either way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I know that you're a privacy guy and you don't want people to follow you specifically, but how can people check out your thoughts online?
I would find my Nostrpub key. I'm not going to read the whole thing out to you on stream here, but it's on my Twitter profile and on pretty much every profile I have anywhere.
And your Twitter is KRUWED.
That's correct.
How do you pronounce that? Crude?
Crude, I guess. Yeah.
Say hello to your cat.
Oh, yeah, he's been napping here the whole time. I think I've heard a cat on one of your recordings before. Is he around?
Yeah,
Okay, well, he can be the mascot for Taproot Wizards.
I have a tuxedo cat and he's the best in the world. Anyway, it was very nice
Awesome.
talking with you. I know that I held you over time. This was not supposed to be this long, but I'm really happy that we got to talk about all of these topics. I feel like I've learned a lot from you. I've regained some of my optimism, even though you have some pessimism of your own. But we just gotta keep fighting, move forward, spread the good word, and tell people that there's nothing wrong with privacy and it's not just a luxury anymore, and it's not just about being paranoid, it's a necessity. So keep doing the good work, and I'll check out your coordinator. You said that in 4 or 5 months since you started doing this, your overall liquidity is half of Samurai's overall. That's insane.
Yeah, but I'm using USD, right? So obviously there's a whole lot of inflation that's happened and numbers gone up a lot. So if we measure by Bitcoin, they're still ahead by a fair bit, I assume. But a lot of people don't seem to realize you wouldn't expect this from their social media presence. But Wasabi under ZK Snacks was like 4 times as big as Samurai in terms of on-chain volume, like new volume, not just remixing. So there's some hidden Bitcoiners out there with a lot of money who really like Wasabi, who are not very vocal on social media.
Well, yeah, that's how it goes. The people who know how to pick their tools, and sometimes the market is a good indicator. But once again, that
And
also
that's why I'm
means
glad
that,
you're keeping Bitcoiners honest with comparing these altcoins, right? Is because if Bitcoin doesn't do well enough, someone is out there who's going to pick up the slack.
well, yeah. And I asked this question today: if the fiat system is gonna collapse tomorrow and you're gonna have no banks, and let's have this assumption that people have cash and they have access to Bitcoin ATMs, where they also have maybe Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash as an option. Which one do you think they're gonna pick? Because at one point the fees on the Bitcoin network are gonna be super high. And do you think that they're gonna be like, oh, I don't care if I pay $50 or $100 for the fee right now? I'll just get on the biggest network. Or are they gonna say, I'll just get Litecoin and swap it later? Or just spend it
Yeah.
because that's the only use case that they want, just to spend their money.
Hmm. I can't remember which magazine it's in, but you actually addressed this point yourself against Elon Musk and his idea to scale Dogecoin by like 1,000x block size and 1 second block time or whatever.
But honestly, a lot has
So
changed since. I gotta say that at the time we didn't have Starlink internet that was this fast and this accessible, and we didn't have storage that was this cheap. So honestly, I'm turning into a big blocker. I gotta be honest with you. I realize, okay, it's the most conservative way to increase the capacity. Everything else is a workaround. It's just a consensus
yeah,
problem. It's more politics than it is a technical discussion.
okay, and and I'm sympathetic to that, right? Um, I don't think a lot of people would agree that Lightning has lived up to everyone's expectations, right? Um, a lot of complexity, and not a lot of people are willing to get their hands dirty and learn it. Whereas on chain is pretty simple. People don't need to know how it works as much as you need to know how Lightning works to use it. Um, as for the the big block argument is unfortunately a slippery slope that there's infinite demand for putting things on the blockchain, right? We see that right now with these little runes tokens or something. Um,
Yeah, but
and
they're
this is
valuable only because the block space is limited. So if the block space was inflated somehow, the value proposition would also get diminished. It gets diluted. They're only counting on the fact that there's only this much data that you can put on Bitcoin, and that's why they think it's valuable. But if it was more data that you could put and there was more of this that you could inscribe, it would just lose its value and the market would go crazy and they would stop doing it because it makes no rational sense.
yep. So I heard you make this argument. I'm like, huh, that's actually pretty clever. Basically, by making it possible to do the thing they want, that they don't want to do it anymore.
Well, they can do it on Litecoin, they can do it on BCH, they can do it on BSV, they can do it on any other chain. But the reason why it's valuable on Bitcoin is that they know that there's a limited block space. And by having this transaction confirmed on the chain and this piece of data that they inscribe, they're basically denying a bunch of other transactions. So that's why it's valuable. But if the mempool
Right.
cleared,
However, yes, I do have a counter argument to that though. In insofar as you don't eliminate this incentive to spam or whatever, you just change the ruler. Because Zcash, right? I don't know if you checked your node on Zcash, but there was like a period of over a year where data was getting written to the chain at an insane rate. Like all the blocks were uh, filled up with basically this exploit where someone could fill them for like 10 cents worth of fees.
I
And this
remember
went on
that.
and on and on and on. Yeah. So even if you're banking on the idea that no one wants to do this because it's just not worth it. Someone will do it just because they're an asshole. So
Well, yeah,
if I say, yeah,
they did it because it was cheap. And there
exactly.
was block space that nobody else was using. So what
Yep.
did they do? They
So if
filled up the blocks. But I'm not advocating for infinite block size. Maybe 16 megabytes or 32 would be enough to get more people to CoinJoin or join layer 2s. I'm not saying that a large base layer is the result or the solution to all the problems. I'm just saying that it can make it easier for millions of people to onboard non-custodially these L2s.
Okay. So my point is that it's a slippery slope. So you just said 16 or 32. So what if I say, hey, I want 8? What is your argument against me wanting 8 megabytes?
Well, my argument is that it's still better than 4. And you're going to clear the mempool, you're going to have the 1 sat per vbyte transaction confirm much faster.
Right. And so then the 16 people will tell that to the 8. The 32 people will tell that to the 16, and so on and so forth. And so this is what we saw with Bitcoin Cash, right? Is it forked with BCH? I think they started with the 8 megabyte. I think they did another fork to like 32. And
Yeah,
then they
but
were like
that's where they
BSV.
stopped for years. They stopped at 32. I actually interviewed their lead developer,
Amri?
Amari,
Yeah.
yeah. And he said
Yeah.
there is only so much you can increase. It's like a speed limit on a car. There's only so much you can increase given the roads and given the overall infrastructure. Because you can keep adding capacity, but it doesn't mean that it's going to make any difference. So they're not idiots, you know. I know that they got this portrayal that they don't know what they're doing and they're the losers and whatever, but they actually are pretty competent engineers. There's a bunch of them right now that are adding all the opcodes that Bitcoin wants to add, and they want to front run the use cases and have them first and build network effects. And honestly, that's pretty smart. If that
Yeah.
ends
Well, I would
up
say their
picking
fault
up
is
on
just being
BCH.
a little overly optimistic in the sense that they are trying to count the amount of legitimate users they can support. But what they need to do is count the amount of attackers it takes to take down their system. And so when you have the or, the guarantee you're trying to provide here is empty block space, right? And if you have empty block space, someone can fill it. So why don't I put this podcast on there, right? Maybe this is like a 5 gigabyte podcast. Then put it on the blockchain. What about the music I want to listen to on my trip this weekend? Let's put it all on the blockchain. What about my cat? I can put a dozen photos of my cat on the blockchain. So there's a never ending amount of demand for storage. And this cost is externalized to other nodes, not just externalized, but multiplied times the number of nodes on the network. So me storing something for myself costs 50,000 times as much because it's broadcasted to every Bitcoin node.
Yeah, but it should be expensive. And it's always going to be expensive. And it's always going to be more expensive than using something like cloud storage. And
Yep.
it's not like there is no other use case and you're not going to compete with financial transactions or whatever that means, because every transaction is financial because it pays a fee. Even open timestamps or something which is a net benefit for Bitcoin and gives it more legitimacy as a technology as opposed to just a money network. Even that one sends transaction fees and requires a minimal amount of block space. So I don't have a definitive answer for this. It's just that there is no other way of scaling that is as time tested and conservative. And the argument was even back in 2017, it was never to not scale the block, to not increase the block size. It was not at the time, it was not considered necessary. They said in the future, if there's going to be faster internet around the world, if there's going to be cheaper storage, then we can keep on with this. It's just that there are a bunch of companies that profit off of Bitcoin not increasing the block size. It's funny because at the time it was presented in a way that said that a bunch of companies are trying to take over the Bitcoin development and increase the block size for their own benefit so that they can put their activity on the base layer. But now you get a bunch of companies that profit from the fact that Bitcoin does not scale the base layer. So pick your poison.
Yeah.
I think it's in the spirit of open source software to have forks. There is Debian, there is Ubuntu, there are all of these Linux forks. I don't see a reason why there should not be experimentation with Bitcoin, and the market will decide in the end. It's just that I love BTC more than anything else in the world. Sorry, girlfriend. But basically, I want it to succeed. And maybe that my own ego is standing in the way. And I'm coming up with all of these ideas which are half baked. But I think doing something is much better than doing nothing and being complacent and adding up to this culture of having a stagnant network.
So I really wish the big blockers got the chance to prove their point. Because you had the BCH fork in 2017, and there wasn't enough adoption to actually make the blocks bigger than original Bitcoin. So you don't actually get to see the long-term result of what bigger blocks turn into, unless you look at Ethereum. So Ethereum is kind of the big blockchain in spirit, even if they don't consider themselves that. They consider themselves like a smart contracting platform or something. But Ethereum continually did these block size increases, and I don't think it turned out well for them. They ended up having higher fees than Bitcoin for a long time on chain, and they eventually kind of do everything on rollups now. So I think that Ethereum is kind of what Bitcoin Cash would look like if Bitcoin Cash got adoption.
Well, that's a fair point, even though Ethereum is more complex and has more mechanisms than a Bitcoin fork. In the case of a Bitcoin fork, you already know what's going to happen because you had BSV, which was the absolute extreme, where people were uploading data. They even ran their own social media network on top of it. I think it was called Twitch or something. So you could observe what's going to happen if that would have been the case. And the exchanges gave up on it because they could no longer synchronize nodes. It was a mess. But BCH is more conservative. They have had 32 megabytes for years, and now they switched to a dynamic block size situation, which I haven't researched well enough. I don't know exactly what that means. They also have a dynamic difficulty adjustment because they're afraid of 51% attacks from the BTC miners.
I do know a little bit about their dynamic block size. Monero has a dynamic block size as well, but a different mechanism. Basically, the block gets bigger if the miner forfeits the inflation, which is really smart, and it's something you can only do when you have tail emission. So Monero has that figured out there. Bitcoin Cash, I heard on a podcast that the block size increase is kind of like the difficulty increase for mining. So if you have big blocks for 2 weeks, next adjustment period gets bigger. But they do this every block. It's not every 2 weeks. So I think these are interesting concepts, and shows that they have an understanding of like economics in the design. So that's pretty cool. I would say that the benchmark, though, is running your own full node on your phone. And so this is something I may be a hypocrite about, right? Is promoting Wasabi, right? Wasabi is not a full node. It's a filtered node. You use block filters to get the exact blocks that contain your transactions and ignore all the rest of them. And this makes Wasabi really like user accessible, right? You can use it on your laptop and be up and running in under 30 minutes. Whereas a blockchain, you're going to take days and days to download. Over Tor, it'd be like weeks. So I think that although the Bitcoin Cash people are saying, see, everything's fine, we have 32 megabyte blocks.
Yeah, they never fill.
That,
That's a good point.
well, not just that they never filled, but basically that our standard should not be whether or not like the network got 51% attacked or something. Our standard should be, can I run a full node on my phone? And so Bitcoin is so far past that that people don't even consider that as the benchmark, right? You can't run a full node on your phone. At least I don't know anyone who does. So
there's actually AB Core on Android, and you can run a full node on your phone. And I did some testing for the HTC Exodus 1S or something, and that was the full node Android phone that they launched in 2019. It was basically a last effort by HTC to become relevant on the phone market. It was a horrible failure. I still have that phone in a drawer somewhere. It was horrible because you're running your own full node, but you could only access the full node with their own wallet. And their wallet only, for example, they only made you use one Bitcoin address.
Oof.
It was so limited, and I did address these concerns to their devs, and they said, yeah, we want to launch an update and have a different iteration. I think it was called the Exodus Vault or something. HTC Exodus Vault, their wallet. And they never improved it because I guess they ran out of funding, and it's still an open source project, I think. So if someone wants to pick that up, good luck. It can be an interesting weekend project, but it happened. It was possible for a while. You could do this. It's just that the user experience was never great, and it drains your battery very fast. I also know of Neura. They're a company from Japan, and they're working on a very lightweight Lightning Network client that can run on the Raspberry Pi, what's the smallest one? Pico or Nano or something like that. The tiniest one that is the least powered. It costs like $10 to buy one. And they optimized it for that use case, and they also wanted to have their own full node. I think they have it. There is the Neyuta wallet. It operates on top of LND, so they did not fully build their own implementation of Lightning, but they do have their own full node, so you can run that on your phone. So there are some options out there. It's just that they're not user-friendly or convenient or popular.
Yeah, I know that like Blixt and Zeus are both LND based clients. I think Breeze as well, and they all use the filter node on mobile. But it'd be really cool to have a full node on your device or on your phone device. That'd be really cool. And you mentioned it draining your battery. I'm critically low right here in case there's anything we need to say before we wrap up.
Thank you very much, Kruw. This was a lot of fun. I love this format. I love not having a format, actually, because we get to have these long-form conversations, which I think become more interesting as time goes by. So to everyone who listened, I want to congratulate you. We had 1,800 something viewers during this live stream. I'm pretty sure that more people will join on, what are the other platforms? Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the others. I hope you guys will tune in and listen because there's a lot to be learned. And thank you very much, Kruw. Follow this guy, remember the name, connect to his coordinator, help him reach the goal of surpassing the liquidity of Samourai, but at the same time, be ready to defend him whenever he needs, because we don't want him to be the next Charlie Shrem or Russ Ulbricht or whatever. He's a smart guy. He's a valuable asset to the community. He knows exactly how blockchain analysis works. And who knows, maybe one day he'll make it obsolete.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on the Bitcoin Takeover podcast.
I'll see you in the next one. Oh, and thanks to the sponsors. I gotta mention them again. Sideshift, Layer 2 Labs, Starkware, and Huddling. Thank you, and I'll see you in episode 55.